All right, you're unmuted.
All right, I'd like to call the February 25th meeting of the Board of Commissioners to order. Could we have roll call, please?
Janat,
Here.
Markey,
Here.
Nye,
Here.
Sauer,
Here.
Trigg,
Here.
Worsecki.
All right, if you stand and join us. Rhonda, would you please invocation?
Sure. I invite you to pray with me. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessing of this day. We ask for your wisdom and guidance during the meeting this morning. We pray that our decisions and outcomes align with your will and bring glory to you. Finally, we thank you for the peace, strength, and grace you offer to each one of us each day. We offer this prayer in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. All right, you had in advance of the meeting, the agenda. I'd take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Murphy will second.
Questions, comments, changes, additions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And who's doing the presentation of the life-saving awards?
Sheriff Rosa.
Sheriff, if you would join us, please. Sure.
As you can see, we have quite a stack here. So I'm going to call the folks up and then I'm going to read what occurred, what this is about. This is a little bit unique in that quite often first responders get calls and they rush to the scene, and sometimes they save lives and sometimes they don't. In this case, they saved a life, but the lady ended up passing away eventually at the hospital with her family. So this is a unique situation, but we want to recognize those that stand up and take part in these things and work as a team. And the team effort is what sometimes makes these life savings happen. Even though in this case, it ended up being a death, but we still want to recognize the effort of these first responders. So Chief Markey, would you come forward? I'm going to hold your for a minute. I'm going to read yours. So will you please step up front? Janet Engler, Emergency Communications Specialist. Homestead Firefighter Hunter Rose. Homestead Firefighter Brent Frederick. Deputy Mitchell Smith. Haven't seen him yet. Sergeant Joe Sen. Josh Rubin. Some of these guys worked last night, so. Emergency Communication Specialist Dusty Roush. Paramedic Chris Parrish. MT Gerald Hendricks. Paramedic Matt Delzio. I'm going to read these. I'm going to read one of the awards to you, give you an idea of what occurred in the on November 19th, 2024. Chief Markey you were on duty working as chief of Homestead Township Fire Department. You were dispatched to an address in Homestead Township on a report of a victim in full cardiac arrest. The caller reported that his 78-year-old wife had collapsed in the living room and that CPR was in progress. Upon arrival, you immediately began performing life-saving medical procedures. These procedures continued for over an hour. The patient was transported to Munson Hospital. Although the woman passed away, your efforts provided the family extra time to assist in the grieving process and help them cope with this traumatic event. Your immediate response, direct communication of the events, and attention to detail helped to prolong the life of another human being. This was a fine example of teamwork and the first responder process as a group effort. We are all in this together. Chief Markey, you're to be commended for saving the life of another under extreme circumstances. Thank you for your outstanding performance and dedications to the citizens of Benzie County. As you can see, we have dispatchers, road patrol officers involved, paramedics, EMTs, firefighter, first responders, and it takes all of us to make these things successful. So appreciate all your efforts. Would you, the crowd, please give them a round of applause? Thank you all. Appreciate you being here.
Plan his computer.
Sheriff, thanks for allowing us to be part of that.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing us to recognize these outstanding individuals.
All right, continuing on with the business for the day. Katie, there's nothing else under that, correct? All right, you had in advance of the meeting, the minutes of February 11th, and entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes as presented. Over.
Sauer,
Craig seconds.
Christie seconds. You Need a minute?
Those are next, Lori.
So those are next. So you got the motion and the words? Okay. All those, any questions, comments, changes, additions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. If you would, hand out the minutes of the closed session for, February 11th, and for the benefit of the audience, when we go into closed session, by advice of the attorney, it's not something that we discuss when we come out, so these minutes are shared at the meeting, and then handed back in after the approval.
Only commissioners can. What? No, only commissioners.
All there. And
All right, if you've had a chance to review these, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
Craig motions to approve the closed session minutes.
Hearing no comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right, we're at our first public comment for items on it and off the agenda. Anybody in the public like to address the commissioners? We'll close public
No.
comment. And okay, gotta move faster. And Eric, you know, if you would state your name and address, please.
Eric Van Duzen in Benzonia. You have on your meeting agenda today, reenactment of incorrect motion that was made in the minutes you just approved from February 11th. I really think you should question the competency of your attorneys with Cummins, McClory, Davis, and Acho. At the last meeting during my public comment, I said I would go look for the injunction that prohibited you from doing what you did, which was not actually make your decision on the record to settle a lawsuit for a certain sum. And I went, and these are all the orders that were issued in the 4 lawsuits that I filed against Benzie County and the Sheriff's Department since 2001. And in those 4 litigations, I gave you one of them at your desk today. And I really think that that one is the one I was referencing at the last meeting. It wasn't an injunction, it was just an order for you to give me like 10 sets of closed session minutes. Excuse me. Because you illegally did something in those closed sessions, which you did on February 11th. And I could sue you for that, and I could get a judge to compel you to release those closed session minutes that you just approved because you made the decision actually in your closed meeting, and that's not allowable. You have to make your actual decision out here. You just rubber stamped it when you came out, and you're correcting that today, and I'm thanking you for that because I don't want to sue you, and I don't really think it's necessary to get your closed session minutes, and I don't have the time. So on that issue, I guess gave you a court opinion. Aldrich versus Delta College Board of Trustees, unpublished court of appeals opinion from 2018, where it says you have to put the specific terms. Look at page 7, the specific terms. Your recommendation for the corrected motion today does not indicate that you're going to put the specific terms. So I would ask you to do that. Secondly, with regards to the recommendation later on in new business to delegate authority to administrator controller regarding grievances and litigation, I think you got to look back at your history with Cummins, McClory, Davis, and Acho on this as well. Because if you look at the McCall lawsuit that you settled, that was pending for over a year. You'd never met with your attorneys until last meeting, February 11th. And all kinds of decisions were made. If you look at the register of actions or the docket sheet, throughout that year, all kinds of decisions were made, but no one had delegated anyone to make them for you, but they were made on your behalf. So I think that needs to be corrected. And also, email I sent you this morning references, if you delegate to the county administrator your authority to make decisions regarding litigation or any other matter, grievances, then she becomes a public body. And that's pretty clear by the published Michigan Court of Appeals opinions and Supreme Court opinion that I cited in the email I sent you this morning. So you need to determine whether or not you want to make her a public body to make these decisions for you and grant her that authority and make these decisions that are your prerogative. And if she's making these decisions, she becomes her own public body and is subject to the OMA and has to hold public meetings to make these litigation decisions in the future. Thank you.
All right, appreciate your interest. Anybody else? All right, then we will close public comment and move on to department and elected official reports. Who would like to, there we go.
Troy Hines, Benzie County Road Commission Manager. The question that everyone's been asking is snow totals. 118.25 inches in honor this year so far. Yesterday I had a little bit of a warm up, which helped out quite a bit, slushing off those primaries and secondaries, but doing pretty well with that. We did get some bid packages back that will be awarded on Thursday for our paving. I think I kind of told you guys the projects that we planned on doing this year, but numbers came in pretty good. So we're going to move forward with that as well. The other thing I just wanted to touch on is I did drop off some flyers today. You guys have those in front of you. I also put them in the back if anybody wants a copy of that, kind of talking about the new facility and reasons why we are looking for a new facility. If there's any questions on those, feel free to give me a call. Call the office and ask for me. I can answer any questions you guys got. I plan on next meeting to have some pictures and a slideshow and a PowerPoint just to kind of run through everything with you guys. We were kind of late to this one, but the next one we'll have that all put together for you guys. Any questions for me?
Just one, and I think Paul brought it up. Anybody that would like to look at the building, just stop by or give you a call.
Absolutely. Yep. You
take a
can-
walk through,
Yep.
gives you a real dose of reality of what's going on, so.
Yeah. Set up, either give me a call and we'll set up a time, or if you guys are just driving by and you want to check it out, anybody's more than welcome to stop by the front office there and we'll have somebody give you a tour around.
Other questions or comments? You had mentioned that the numbers look, I don't know the exact language, favorable, or they look good. What numbers were you referring to?
For paving, the paving packages and the
Oh.
chip seal packs, all the projects we have going forward this year.
Okay, and can you share with us what your plan is in terms of outreach to the community?
So we have, well, Paul has been kind of spearheading going to the township meetings and village meetings. We've been to, I think, 4 so far. 3 or 4 so far. But we plan on going to all the townships, all the villages, to explaining this flyer and explaining kind of the why, and of course, dropping off my business cards. Anybody has any questions, to give me a call and ask the questions they want answered, so they're informed. I
Right.
see a lot of misinformation out there on Facebook and it drives me insane, but I rather people just call and ask the questions, even if they're hard questions.
So speaking of misinformation, and I'm not doing this to be damaging to your efforts, but there was an article in the paper that suggested that I was supporting this. What I supported was the fact that I think you need a new building. I wasn't going public to say that I was supporting a potential upcoming millage for this year. I've not made that decision yet at all, but I just want to correct that because that was misinformation.
Yeah, I think you and Rhonda have both said that you would like to leave decisions up to the taxpayers of the county, which I appreciate.
Any other comments or questions for him? Appreciate you being here today.
Thanks.
Look forward to other updates. Paul, is there anything you wanted to say on this subject? Okay, all
I'll be back.
right. Very good.
Thank you.
Bet. Any other department heads or elected officials? Gonna move right through then today.
Nope, Brooke is here.
No, but jump up. You're good.
She is under there.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Troy.
you. You can see I move right along, don't I?
Oh, that's good.
On the agenda, actually.
Yep. Yeah, I was getting to her next.
So the main premise today was to,
Could you identify yourself?
oh, I'm
people?
sorry, I'm Brooke Pop, the Frankfurt Dow Memorial Field Airport Manager. So the FKS economic impact on our community, which everyone previously had that information, I detailed what the characteristics of the airport are, the system plan that's been designated, their corresponding tiers. FKS complements the area's larger airports, Traverse City, Cadillac, Blacker, down in Manistee, but we also are able to respond to our community's needs and, of course, tourism. So the focus mainly of FKS is for infrastructure and to gain self-sufficiency. The ARC, which is on the economic impact, is a reference code and it outlines goals of FKS, and one of which is zoning. Zoning is primary. Dave Spraggins was appointed to the township board when I went over to the airport authority. And he and I have been working, he's also on the planning commission with the township. And he and I have been working steadily on getting zoning, airport zoning into the township's ordinance. So I will be speaking with them actually tomorrow night. And let's see, so, but the primary objective of airport zoning is to prevent airport hazards, provide additional security and protection of the airport users, and those of us that live and work in the community. The zoning ordinance, it states that it's a 10-mile radius for a hazard area. There's going to be height limitations. As with every ordinance, is going to be a permitting process, a zoning administrator, board of appeals, etc. I have reached out to MDOT I would like them to articulate their hazard area because that's going to better define what the zoning board will entail. Do you have a question? Art, you look,
I always look this way.
okay. So there was a question posed to me by Ms. Trigg, and thank you for that. That was a very good question. The first one was, what are the barriers to adopting Michigan aviation zoning? And I thought about your question for a while and I thought, well, was there a specific area that you were interested in? But then I realized it really isn't my question to answer. That would be more the township's question. Because they're going to be facilitating this process. The second part of your question was, because of our tier system and our designations, would it allow for disaster relief to be flown into the county if necessary? So I went and looked at the county's information packet that they had for the natural hazard mitigation plan, and 13 different, which is the handout I passed out to everyone, 13 different natural hazard or events, and how FKS could respond to those. So we do have approximately a 4,000-foot runway, and it can accommodate obviously helicopters, light to mid-sized jets, some turboprop aircraft and whatnot, anything with a short takeoff and landing. That can facilitate bringing in whatever supplies would be needed. I also mentioned that if there was like a forest fire, some of our smaller planes that we have hangared at the airport are used as scouts, and they're often out looking for other areas that need attention. They're helping the air tankers and things like that. So we would be very necessary if there was a disaster. And Traverse City and Manistee Blacker are only 14 minutes away by air. So it's a very quick response between the airports. We have to keep in perspective too. Traverse City, the city alone has 16,000 people, and our entire county is 18,000. So there is a reason why we are a smaller supportive airport rather than a very large one. Are there any other questions?
Anything you want to say regarding the package you put, the information you put in our packet?
That was basically, I just detailed out basically our operations for last year, financial statements. Yes, we were denied the grant that I was hoping for, the state local grant, and that was because of zoning. So that's Dave and I's primary focus going forward the next few months, is helping facilitate the township and doing that. Mhm.
Rick, I'll put this question to either you or Katie.
Okay.
Can we get an update on where we're at and updating the bylaws for the airport to include Crystal Lake Township?
The MOU.
Or
I was
the-
saying the MOU, the
Mhm.
bylaws do reflect. The MOU is, so I had a nice meeting with the city and the township to work through the MOU and some possible tweaks to that document. Our legal counsel is working to finalize that. I did send a further updated draft over to the city and the township, and I'm waiting to hear from them on their response on that document. As long as they give the green thumb to that document, it'll come forward to you for approval here pretty soon.
Very good. We've been working on that for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Brooke, just one other question. You're new to the position, relatively new, less than a year.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain certifications that you have to have as a manager. Where are you at in that process?
I passed my certification prior to being hired. So, and there is some ongoing training, which as it comes up, I will be performing.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. One last chance. Questions or comments? Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
We'll move on to approval of the bills.
I just want to correct that the bills are from February 7th through the 20th. I know that the spreadsheet says 30th through the 6th. That was a typo there. These are the bills from February 7th through the 20th of February in the amount of $208,112.62.
We're gonna cut you some slack. We know you're shorthanded. Hard to catch everything.
Yes.
I'd look for a motion to approve the bills.
I'll make that motion.
Peg will second.
Any comments or questions?
We're all shorthanded.
Roll call.
That's our new clerk today.
Sauer? You start with me. Okay. Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Worsakki,
Yes.
Janat,
Yes,
Markey,
Yes.
Nye.
Yes.
very good. We're a little early for the presentation from Bacon, but are you prepared? We appreciate you taking the time to be here today.
I appreciate that you are rebooked me after I had the flu that
Mhm.
one day. So thank you all for inviting Bacon to share an update. My name's Diane Mahoney. I'm the executive director. I've been on staff since September 30th. And our board president, Kim Simon, is here as well. In your board packet, there was a quick snapshot of our results from 2024, our impact statement. And we do have additional, Kim said he'd be my Vanna White. If anyone wants a copy, he will gladly share those. So again, I came here September 30th. I joined my husband, who is a very long time resident of the area. And my background has always been in nonprofit work. So from the time I've graduated college, my last 17 years were spent leading nonprofits. So when I came over here to Bacon, there was so much that impressed me about this organization, and primarily the resilience of the organization. So for 40 years, it has been serving the residents of Benzie as well as Northern Manistee County. 2024 represented challenges for the organization, but what I think it really brought to the forefront was the incredible strength that the organization has, and that is that it is from the community for the community. A couple of years ago, my son is an officer in the Army, and he was stationed in Tacoma, Washington. And so my daughters and I, we went and visited him, and we went to the Redwood Forest in Oregon. And we were amazed by those huge redwood trees. You know, from a seed the size of, a quarter of an inch, I think is the size of the seed for a redwood, grows a tree that can be 300 feet tall, 30 feet wide. If anyone's been around those trees, you can't even fathom without seeing them. And yet their root system is only 6 to 12 feet deep, but it can spread for 4 acres. And to me, that represents community, and that represents Bacon. It is that interconnectedness of the root system that gives the organization and the community the strength to withstand the powerful storms, the things that will come along just through environment and situations that arise. And it's not just the root system, but it's the leaves up above, right? It takes everyone at every level in the community to really create a community that will embrace one another. And I think that's what Bacon represented over the year of 2024. We need groves, right? Those trees, they can't survive by themselves. They need groves to survive and thrive. And that's what Bacon is here to do for the community. There will never be enough money. There will never be enough people, and there most certainly will never be enough time to make the difference we want. So we need connections and we need community partners. So we are very grateful. Josh, I see Josh here from Grow Benzie, great community partner, Benzie Senior Resources. We do a lot of work with them. Benzie Bus, they're actually over at our facility today doing focus groups. Centra Wellness, and the business community. We have Dine Out for Bacon. We have the area grocery stores supporting a food drive coming up March 6th through the 8th. So we're incredibly grateful for all of you and all of those partners. And the recap in 2024, I'm just going to touch on a couple of highlights in that. We did see an across the board growth of 23% in the need for our services. So we had 159 new households that came to Bacon for first-time support. And this is following 2 years where we had 200 new households each year. So I think a lot of that has to do with the new building that the community supported and an increase in awareness of the organization and the services we offer. And then, of course, for last year, we expanded our hours. So we're now open for neighbor support 5 days a week and also one evening. Last year also saw the launch of our Adult Learner Fund. So if there are residents in Benzie County who are interested in going back to get a GED, we have a partnership with Michigan Works. And not only will we help assist them get their GED, but we have a special scholarship fund that we can help them if they choose to continue on with their education. So for us, it's all about meeting people where they are, giving a hand up, not a handout. Two of our staff members are actually former neighbors of our organization. So we're incredibly proud of that. One other program I want to highlight is Blessings in a Backpack. So Blessings in a Backpack is addressing students who have been identified by the schools as in danger of being hungry over the weekend. So Blessings in a Backpack was volunteer run by Skip Comer, who still is the volunteer project coordinator, but we umbrellaed that program in under Bacon to ensure its long-term sustainability. And in the past 2 years, that program has grown exponentially. This past year alone, we are serving 88 more students every single week. So that is pretty significant. So when we look ahead to where we have to focus our efforts, this year of 2025 is going to be about stability, making sure our organization has all the internal systems we need to be successful, but it's also about meeting the growth and need that we're seeing. So we have more students coming in, we have more people coming into our clothing center and for our food pantry. We currently spend about $11,000 to stock our shelves in the food pantry. So that is money that we raise within the community. And we're looking at, what might be coming at us. So there are some things. Bacon is not federally supported, but we benefit from federal programs. So for example, at the end of last year, we were awarded through the United Way of Northwestern Michigan, approximately $50,000 through emergency food and shelter programming. We don't know if we'll receive that money. So that is a potential, new factor that we're monitoring for, as well as we receive money through the USDA through the food trucks. So through the Northwest Michigan Food Coalition, we all combine and we do group buying. So we get at least 1 to 2 pallets of food quarterly from a program called TFAP. And do not ask me what the acronym stands for because I can't remember right now. But that food is valued between $2,000 and $2,500. So if that program goes away, that will impact us as well. We feel we're ready to step into the gap should that happen. The board has been very, very frugal and forward thinking in terms of creating an operational reserve. That was a big goal when we built that new building. We didn't want to have a beautiful facility that we couldn't keep open. So we do have an operational reserve to address unmet need, but it's not a bottomless well. So, we are being careful about how we spend and so that we can be there to meet the community's needs for the next 40 years. That's all I have. Any questions?
Questions, comments?
Thank you.
I can tell you that, Bacon is well received in our community. You guys do some great things. I know that you have partnerships well beyond the ones that you identified.
Absolutely.
Look forward to you guys doing some good work going forward.
Thank you very much.
Is it Scott? Did you want to say anything?
Kim Simon.
I'm sorry.
Appreciate the opportunity to come and present before the commissioners.
Good to see you.
I agree with you. We appreciate everything everyone in the community does to support our organization because there, as Diane mentioned, we have a great need, unfortunately, in this county. And we do a lot of work to make sure people
You bet. Thanks for your leadership there.
Commissioners,
Please,
I deal with landlord tenant matters.
Judge, for the benefit of people that might be online, can you identify yourself?
John D. Mead, Benzie County Probate Judge and District Judge.
Thank you.
So Bacon has thrown a lot of money at people that temporarily needed help. I mean, they threw a lot of money at it, as did a lot of churches and other sources up, Father Fred, number of them. So it's not, it doesn't fall on deaf ears to the court what Bacon does. And Jerry's big shoes to fill, so
All right.
thank you.
Thanks for your comments. All right, good presentation. We'll move into old business.
So the first item on the agenda is the wage for the magistrate position. As you know, over the course of the last several months, we've talked about wages for various positions within Benzie County, and this really is the last one on the list that was identified as one to discuss. I've had various meetings with both judges, the chief judge, Judge Thompson, as well as Judge Mead, to talk about this position because, as you know, Wally Armstrong did retire. This position has been vacant for a bit of time, and it is causing tax on the staff down there. And so based on our conversations and looking at the comparables, there was comparables that really were outliers in the grand scheme of wages. Those who handled all courts versus just district probate and such. And so in agreement with the judges, we threw out the outliers of the wages so that it didn't skew the wage to be very, very high. So what you're looking at today is really the average with throwing out the outlier, specifically Clare County, which had a wage that was very high, but the position was very different. And so $70,600 would be the wage for this position. The judges are asking for approval of this wage so that we can post this position since it has been vacant for quite some time. We do have money set aside in contingency for wages. And like I said, this would be the last wage coming before you for approval this fiscal year. I can't bank on next fiscal year because the elected officials can ask for whatever they like, same with department heads. So we're here in front of you today asking for approval of this. This is about a $10,500 increase from where the position sits at current in its vacant status.
So before we open it up to a motion, I'd like to open it up to discussion. Does anybody have any comments on this?
Is there a specific accreditation that's required to fulfill this position?
I will have either the court administrator or the judge address the specifics of that.
Primary requirement is they must be a resident of either Benzie or Manistee counties. They have to be within the 85th District Court. The training comes from Lansing. So pretty much good background check, high school diploma, GED gets you through the door, but obviously the more credentials you bring in, the better. Wally Armstrong, I'm going to argue I had the best magistrate in the state of Michigan with Wally. And quite frankly, well, it's going to be hard to replace Wally, but
Will you address the fact that many magistrates are considered Juris Doctorates?
well, it's kind of ironic because there are two types of magistrates. Attorney magistrate, non-attorney magistrate. The only difference is the attorney magistrate can do small claims. That's it. So the non-attorney magistrate in all other respects is viewed in the same light as somebody with a law degree.
So this wage is established regardless of the accreditation that you could get a Juris
Juris
Right,
Doctorate.
Doctorate,
right.
or you could have a high school diploma. It makes no
Right.
difference. The wage stays the same.
Yeah, we're not getting an attorney for that wage after the pay raises that just went to the public defenders and the prosecutor's offices. Manistee had a hard time getting somebody for 70 grand to fill when Judge Henry took the bench and Jane Johnson got promoted to the head of the public defender's office.
Good questions. Other comments or questions? Katie, where does this fit in a pay range? Where are we at on that?
So this is by far still not the top, but it is no longer the lowest. Our magistrate position was second from the bottom of the comparables. This puts it in the mid to still below the mid range of the total comparables. So not the top, but not quite the mid, just about the mid.
So for the benefit of the public, the commissioners over the last several years have been slowly trying to work towards being more competitive in our pay in Benzie County, knowing that we're never going to be at the top, but we had to move people from the bottom. So we've been looking at about the mid-range. Admittedly, some of our concern is it sustainable? You know, we had a big influx of money in 2019, 20, and 21. made us a little bit giddy, quite frankly, because we were able to do some projects we had never been able to do. But it's been our goal to make sure that we're giving department heads and elected officials the tools to be able to hire well-qualified people. And you don't hire well-qualified people at the bottom of the pay scale. Just doesn't happen.
I will say this. Wally was originally supposed to retire in June.
Hmm.
And what we were paying, I had maybe 2 qualified people put in for it. One I worked with previously in another jurisdiction, and that ain't happening. And the other one would be borderline nepotism. So that is an impossibility.
Thank you. Any other questions for the judge? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion that the salary rate be 7,600. Funds available in the general fund. Carry budget, yes.
Craig will second.
Okay, again, comments or questions? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Sauer,
Yes.
Trigg,
Yes.
Worsakki.
Yes.
Janat,
Yes.
Markey,
Yes.
Nye. Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Before we launch into the next one, and this is about consideration of a reenactment of an action that was taken, I want to kind of clear the air. The commissioners for several years have worked very hard to make sure that we're always doing the right thing. And I know that sounds like a campaign speech, but it's not. We've worked very hard to make sure that we have the right legal counsel, to the extent that about 3 or 4 years ago, we did an RFP on legal counsel, engaged with a new firm that has a very deep bench for us, so that we feel like that we're getting the input that we need. I am more than grateful that I have citizens that are willing to challenge the process. I wish more people were engaged in how they interact with government. But I want to make it clear from this point and some other actions you're going to see going forward, that we have to hire the right people and then assume that they're giving us good information until proven differently. And one of the ways that we did that is we deepened the bench. With that, Katie, I'm going to invite you to launch into the next item.
So what you have in front of you is a recommended motion from our legal counsel who represented the county in the Johnny Ray McCall incident. In addition to this, was reviewed by our general counsel, Cole Stoker and Toski. So what we need to place on the record as far as the minutes go is that the chair will indicate that this is a reenactment of the board's decision in open session on February 11th, 2025, which I believe he has stated so. And then we would look for a mover and a seconder to approve the motion as presented, which is in your packet, which I said was reviewed by legal counsel, both civil counsel and general.
I'll try to read it. This covers everything.
According to our legal counsel, this is the recommended motion to take.
The Board of Commissioners approves the settlement amount in the matter of Johnny Ray McCall Jr. versus Benzie County et al. Case number 124 CV 00086 JMB PJG pursuant to the confidential mediation proceedings between the parties, and upon advice and recommendation of counsel, such settlement to be formalized and finalized in the release and settlement agreement to be negotiated between the parties, and authorizes the chair to sign. Is there support for that motion? Mark, you will support. Thank you. Katie, anything else that you want to add to this?
I have not received word whether or not Crystal Lake has accepted any sort of settlement based on the mediation. So until that time, this settlement is still pending. It's not settled per se, because we are still waiting for all 3 parties to have agreed. And so because I have not received word from Crystal Lake, this is where we're at.
I do have some information on that at their
Great.
township meeting. The other day, let me give you the date.
Christie, just a question if I could ask.
Yes.
Is this a published, have they published this yet?
That I can't say, but I was there and they had their lawyer and they said that they both settled and they gave a dollar amount.
Okay.
And they put that in their motion and it passed. I can say that I was there. But
So if-
I haven't looked on their website to see if the minutes have been posted with that on it. I can quickly look at
So
that.
based on the advice from legal counsel, if Crystal Lake has also accepted that amount, you could also put that amount in your motion if you would like, if there was amendment to the motion.
So I'm all about full disclosure. You know how I feel. Public needs to know what I know for the
Yep.
most part. But this reenactment has to do with a later date, an earlier date than today. That information was not available at the time that we took this motion.
Correct.
And let's be clear, we're clearing up that motion, not based on new information we have today.
Correct.
I have no problem with that information being shared, but the motion is based on February 11th action, of which at that time, nothing had happened at Crystal Lake Township,
That
right?
is correct.
Yes, the meeting was February 19th.
So the board could adopt this motion, which clears up February 11th. And if the board would be obliged to do so, also state an additional motion regarding the settlement amount and full disclosure to the community.
So let's take care of February 11th first. I believe that we had a motion of support.
Yep.
Thank you, Tim. I'm going to do a roll call on this.
Don't start with Gary, you gotta
Yeah,
rotate.
you gotta roll
yeah.
call.
Greg,
Yes.
Worsakki,
Yes.
Janat,
Yes.
Markey,
Yes.
Nye. Yes. Sauer.
Yes.
Okay, I'm more than comfortable now making that information available to the public.
Absolutely.
I don't like crafting motions on the fly. So if we could just make it a statement rather than a motion,
You could,
you hesitate.
based on information being pushed to the board, I think you are better off putting it in a motion form.
So Christie, why don't you share with us what you learned at the meeting first?
Mhm.
More specific details.
So, they had their attorney, Attorney Weirda there, and he basically informed that he was in closed session with a couple of the folks from Crystal Lake Township and said that they had and that insurance claim was settled for $20,000.
Their portion of it.
Yes.
Okay.
And they moved on that to I can't remember the wording, but they moved that that they were going to settle that claim for the $20,000.
And
And
Katie,
it passed.
for
Sorry.
the benefit of the board and the public, can you share with us what the total damages were and what our portion was?
My concern is that while this board decided in closed session, what it was willing to do, Crystal Lake Township has made their position clear. Are all parties in agreement on this? Is this finalized information?
So the documents have not been drafted. The actual settlement documents themselves have not been drafted for actual signature and release. What you and Crystal Lake are doing is accepting the proposed settlement from mediation. Once the documents are drafted and signed, then it's done. So until those documents are signed, it's not done per se, it's near the finish line.
And to your knowledge, is it done?
The actual agreement itself.
Yes.
I have not seen a draft of any sort of that agreement.
And my concern, I want to do everything right. I think the Sunshine Laws serve an excellent purpose. We need to be transparent. The public has the right to information, but case law was set on our desk this morning. I'm not an attorney. None of us are attorneys up here. To know, are we in jeopardy of sacrificing a finalized agreement by offering information too soon. I mean, there is also the negotiation phase of situations until it's finalized. I don't know if we're doing this correctly or not. And I don't know if we're jeopardizing any sort of finalization of this by taking the actions we're about to take, and it causes me concern. Is that warranted?
You have every right to be concerned, absolutely. In Arts and I's conversations with legal counsel, they indicated that until a settlement is done, there's certain things that really should be confidential and not into the public light. But then he also said, if we're in a situation where we're near the finish line, the settlement has been reached, Crystal Lake has also published their amount, he's then saying Benzie County could do so as well. So that's kind of the phase that we're at right now. You've corrected the action from February 11th to add in the detail and such. Crystal Lake has made it public what they're settling to within this settlement. Based on the conversations that we had with legal counsel, and Art, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I see that we could also share that amount.
Yeah, no, I was in the same conversation.
Yep. So that is our interpretation of these conversations.
Specifically to your concern is that we're left with the impression that this does not jeopardize the settlement at all. If we were to share it publicly now.
Yes, at this juncture.
Okay, I will err on the side of transparency and rely on the fact that you two have spoken and have our best interests and we're represented well, and we'll move forward with that understanding.
Something to say.
Yeah, it just seems like we're kind of all of a sudden flying by the seat of our pants here and making decisions on the fly without, I know you talked to the attorney, but I'm like Rhonda, I'm not that comfortable with just crafting something in the middle of a meeting without the legal.
I share those same concerns. I don't like doing motions on the fly, but this isn't flying by the seat of our pants. We've had a number of discussions trying to understand where we're at on this, what we can share with the public, what we can't. It was very clear that if we chose to, we could. I'm more of the mind that why do we have to do it in a motion? Why can't we just publicly, this is what we're settling for? What distinguishes it from needing a motion versus just a statement? None of us can answer that here. We're not legal counsel, but.
So would it hurt anything to talk with them about it, legal counsel about it, and do it at the next meeting?
Well, it never hurts me. I'm always about getting legal counsel.
I'll feel a little better. I have one big concern about this that seems to be bypassing us, is the fact that this board has not been informed up to date on all these suits. I know I've discussed this with our other fellow commissioners, but we seem to be getting the information after the fact. And when our attorneys are involved, I would think that this board should be involved from the start.
I doubt anybody disagrees, and we are going to have a more thorough discussion on that before we get out of here today. Under new business, I believe. So it's already been put on the record what the settlement was for, what our portion of the settlement was for. I mean, that's now part of the official record. I'm not sure doing a motion enhances public's information.
I will clarify that Crystal Lake's settlement amount was put on the record. You have yet to say what Benzie's is.
Okay. Well, what I'm hearing is that we have no objection to doing a motion. I'll repeat myself. We've already gone on the record of what the settlement is, and that maybe we formalize it at the next meeting with the motion drafted by legal counsel.
Yeah, we can do that. So I can have on the next motion formalizing the settlement amount of $20,000 for Benzie County, which is coupled with Crystal Lake Township's $20,000.
Would the board be comfortable with approaching it that way? Rhonda?
If it's necessary, I mean, the facts have been stated. We're being more than transparent. The information's out there. If that's what we need to do to be compliant with case law, that's what we need to do. And that's where I feel like we need to have a better understanding, and these, as we move forward, being informed in the process as we go, we need to better understand what our responsibility is to the public and being transparent.
Evan, does that represent your thoughts?
It does.
Tim, you've not said anything on this? Any concerns?
I do know that this board as a whole, at least I think, as I know I personally do, we want to do everything that is appropriate, and we want to do everything that's required by law. I think we want to be very transparent to our public. We don't want to withhold any information unless we were required to do so. As long as we're doing what's correct, I'm good with it.
Gary, you want to make any further comments?
No, I think this covers it. If we have to do something official, it's pretty obvious that out there.
Christie, any last thoughts?
No, I see no reason why we wouldn't be transparent.
So why don't we let the record reflect that by consensus, we'll ask legal counsels to address what is the best language to create a motion, if necessary, for the March 11th meeting.
Tentatively, yeah, we have that conversation today too.
Let's say for our next Board of Commissioner
Yes.
meeting. All right, so we'll just show that by consensus, no action needed. All right, and
That should be it for that item.
that's it. Okay. You want to take the next one, please?
So the
Okay.
next one is the strategic priorities, goals and actions. You saw this at a study session more than once. There was red lines offered at the study session. And so what you have in front of you is the document in final form. I know that there was some question on whether or not the final section notes to the document should be included within that document because it is individual commissioner goals versus the Benzie County goals and strategies as a whole. And so I did want to bring that forward specifically. If the board wants to adopt this document, there is a motion in there to adopt this document. If you want to offer additional changes to that document, I just need to know that. And you could offer changes as well as amend or adopt the document as amended too.
I reviewed the document. I would ask that the end portion notes to document, and these are items identified by individual commissioners as their individual priorities. I'm going to ask that be removed. That was a conversation in a study session that was very, I don't want to say loose, but it was a conversation where we each offered what our priorities at this moment in time were. I think if we were to memorialize that, I would prefer each commissioner be given the opportunity to professionally state or at least have time to craft their response. This was taken verbatim out of that study session with just bullet, but it could be done better if we were going to include it. But honestly, with 4-year terms and the possibilities that priorities could change down the road, I just don't think that this portion should be included with the county's strategic plan. I'd ask they be removed.
If I could just follow up on that, Katie, I thought that we were putting in the community's comments. I didn't know that we were putting in the individual priorities for this year for the commissioners.
That was the master plan. You're muddying the master plan with this document. The master plan adoption was to incorporate the community's comments. Specifically at the last study session, when I presented this document in red line form, it was noted that you appreciated that these items were added onto the end of the document, but there was no yes or no of leaving them. So I just left them. And so if the board would like to see them removed, great. We'll simply take those off and, keep those tucked back on a separate list of things we're working on. But I simply left them because there was appreciation for including them and no dissent to remove them.
Oh, I agree with. Yes. Commissioners.
My mistake, when I spoke to each commissioner privately about your goals, a couple of you said, you know, hey, look at, these are kind of internal goals. These aren't for publication. So my mistake, I should have caught it before. Do you want to try to craft a motion that includes what the thoughts are, and we can maybe see if we can get support for it?
I would offer that the motion that I wrote out for you, it says, you know, as presented in the packet communications, you could strike that piece and say as amended to blah, whatever you want to say.
What is the heading of that final portion?
You want me to just-
Notes to document.
Oh, sure.
All right, I can do it. So I'll make a motion that the Board of Commissioners adopts a strategic priorities, goals, and actions for Benzie County dates February 25th, 2025, removing on page 5 the notes to document section.
Perfect.
Great.
9 seconds.
Great. Thanks, Evan.
Yes, sir.
We'll open it up again to questions or comments.
But we will keep that list.
Yeah.
This is kind of individual priorities is kind of how I looked at it. And I like the idea of having some focus to go forward with. Necessarily we're gonna get there, but it helps the community see that the commissioners aren't just sitting back watching. So,
No one's watching TV all day.
I know that Tammy also memorialized your notes in the minutes from that meeting. So it is memorialized in the minutes, and then I have a goal setting folder on our drive and I'll keep it in there.
To your concern, as your chair for this year, I'll be checking in with you guys periodically just to see if there's anything administration or myself can be doing to help further those goals. And you and I have talked privately about that, so.
mhm. I just
Anything
think
else
it's
you
a
wanna
good
add?
focus.
I just think if you want these on file as priorities for commissioners, I mean, let's focus on mine. It has Commissioner Nye / sewer system / I would like the opportunity to perhaps restate that in a different way, that my priority is the vision of a regionalized sewer system that comes in a phased approach, initially beginning with the US 31 corridor through Benzonia and then Commissioner Nye / sewer system.
Right.
It just,
These are
so
just my
I think
quick
if we're
notes.
going to memorialize things, there's a way to give an opportunity to state things better, more clearly, more descriptive in what the vision really is. That was taken as notes off of, again, a conversation at a study session. And actually the second part of what was deemed a priority for me as a commissioner was actually a comment about, I think it was education and training. I don't have that page up in front of me, where I was simply commenting on internship opportunities that a private business had offered. And so it did not reflect what I would write my priorities and goals as if I had been given that opportunity.
So maybe what could be something cool for the Board of Commissioners, and I've seen it on other local municipality websites, is that on the commissioners page, the commissioners individually have their own statements on the website as their individual priorities. And if that is something that this board would like to do, I'm happy to upload your statements or bullet points or objectives and give you more of a space on our website than just a one page that says commissioners. We could easily do that if you want to make this more of a statement to the community. Very easy to do.
Why don't we have that discussion? Not necessarily today, but
Yeah.
we can have that discussion.
Move it to a study session. I think it needs to be developed. I think if we were going to make statements like that, they would have to be revisited annually and updated, and that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing.
Yeah.
Let's have that conversation.
Let me add it to my list of study session items.
So we've got a motion with support out there. Katie, do we need to do a roll call on this? On a voice vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? All right, good conversation, folks. Katie, want to take the next one?
So the next one is opioid funding. So over the course of a couple of study sessions, we talked about opioid funding and reviewed the 4 proposals that Benzie County did receive for funding. At the last meeting, as a result of your conversation, there appeared to be 2 recommendations for funding and then 2 recommendations for gathering additional data and bringing those other proposals back for consideration. So what's in front of you today are motions for those recommendations that you made at the study session. I will say that I've already communicated with Sarah May, and her and I are setting up a meeting to sit and chat. And then Riverbend, we have some email communication started back and forth as well. So we'll be having some of those conversations, and then we can bring that back to you in the near future.
I'd be happy to make the first motion that the Board of Commissioners authorizes up to $20,000 in direct payments to the Transportation Authority of opioid funding over the next 5 years in the not to exceed amount of $4,000 annually to support transportation services for parole and probation services for the Benzie County offices with annual feedback required describing the impact of the funds.
Mark will support.
Questions, comments?
I feel we're missing something there. I would like that to be a reimbursable as it's spent. I don't know if that should be added into that.
Sir.
So this would be direct payments to Benzie Transportation Authority. They don't really have a way of tracking for reimbursement. It doesn't really work that way. There's no way to do that. I talked to Sean about it as well. And the way the program is currently is there's not a reimbursable way. So that's why it's direct payments to BTA. But based on the usage of Sean's folks, we will pay the bill. Whereas Central Wellness specifically
be
says
going through them.
reimburse. Well, then you're gonna get DTMB involved on certain things. Then it has to go through the
Just,
state, and that's a whole new animal.
You're looking for accountability.
Yeah, and I don't see it in that motion.
Well, by making direct payments, we went that route because we thought that was then being accountable to how the money was being used.
There's also the requirement of annual feedback required describing the impact of the fund. So Sean has to give you a report at least annually as to how the funds are being spent. So he's going to tell you there's this many bus passes, there's this going on. That's the other accountability piece of it is that.
Is my
report.
understanding correct? If only $2,000 of passes are used in a year, it won't be refunded for another $4,000. It
Correct. We're gonna pay for the usage, so it's
Right.
up to, and that's why it also says up to, because he may only need $1,200, and that's all we're going to pay for this year.
And for what it's worth, we've been in conversation with the leadership group at the busing authority. And at their March meeting, they will take up the question about sharing the cost with the county.
Yep.
I'm not going to tell you what the outcome of that will be, other than their finance chair said they would be advocating for it.
All right.
Any other comments or questions? Not hearing none, we're going to need to do roll call on this.
Correct.
Janat,
Yes.
Markey,
Yes.
Nye,
Yes.
Sauer,
Yes.
Trigg,
Yes.
Worsakki.
Yes. I'd like to make the motion that the Board of Commissioners reimburses up $50,000 Central Wellness and opioid funding to expand the substance abuse health home services in Benzie County. The report required describing the impact of the.
9 seconds.
Questions, comments, any input at all? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Markey,
Yes.
Nye,
Yes.
Sauer,
Yes.
Trigg,
Yes.
Worsakki.
Yes.
Janat.
Yes. All right, we're getting ready to move into new business. Does anybody need a break at this point?
Yes.
Sure.
Let's take 5.
email now.
We'll call it back in session.
Yep.
Starting under new business, Katie.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. So in your packet, you will see a draft agreement with the Grand Traverse Land Conservancy. This document has been going back and forth with Parks and Recreation and the Land Conservancy for quite some time. The Land Conservancy, as you all know, has supported Benzie County's public lands for eons. They've supported public lands all around the region for eons. And as they go through changes in administration and management and such, they're really working to beef up their documentation as to the different partnerships and relationships that they have. And so this is a result of that. It's a document memorializing the relationship that we've had for Railroad Point for many, many years. We've went through this document with our legal counsel as well as the Land Conservancy's legal counsel. These schedules or exhibits in the back spell out what has been going on for all of these years. And so this is really to memorialize and, contractually obligate those relationships that we've had for these years. As you know, these sort of things should be done. It shouldn't be a handshake anymore in 2025. So
I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that the Board of Commissioners approves the agreement for resource management services with Grand Traverse Land Conservancy for services related to maintaining and enhancing Railroad Point. Such agreement subject to approval as to its form by legal counsel and authorize the chair to sign.
Or will second, so we can talk about it.
Let's open it up to discussion.
Okay, my concern with this, it's specific to one spot. There's a lot of conservancy property in this county. My township, Blaine Township, has a huge amount. We have no agreement, maintenance, and there's always issues when it comes to somebody riding a bicycle up there, getting hurt. The fire department to get up there to get to them, or police department or whoever. Just think this is a start. I think it's got to go a lot farther.
So this is specific to the property we own. This is not Conservancy's doing us a favor by helping us maintain our county property. If they own their own property, that's between the township and the Conservancy to figure out. But this is for property that Benzie County owns. We own Railroad Point. This is what this is specific to,
They
not
turned it
property that the
over.
Conservancy owns.
They bought it originally, right?
Right, so Railroad Point is owned by the county. And then there's a tiny
that's
little
something
section
that's-
that the road
right.
commission's involved in. There's the trail piece that goes through, which is DNR partnership. Conservancy does have a small sliver. But this is specific to our county-owned property.
Thanks for the
That's fair.
clarification. Anything else,
For
Gary?
discussion later.
Yep.
Thank you.
The township should address the Conservancy though on those other issues.
Trouble is, it's in 2 counties.
Well, that makes sense.
That's part of the issue. So the Lake Ann area has a lot of it. So anyway, we'll worry about that later. Thank you.
Oh, good question. Thank you. Anybody else? Hearing none, and we need to do a roll call on this.
Right. Nye,
Yes.
Sauer,
Yes.
Trigg,
Yes.
Worsakki,
Yes.
Janat,
Yes.
Markey.
Yes.
Katie, as we introduce the next subject, would you please read the memo in the packet in its entirety, please?
Sure. Since my time in Benzie County, there have been numerous prior actions of the board to designate the administrator, controller, or administration office to represent the county or oversee projects and operations. These actions include, but are not limited to, assigning or designating the administrator controller as A, the public information officer for Benzie County, B, the member representative of Benzie County to the Michigan Municipal Risk Management Association for claims, official proceedings, and annual renewals, C, the county's representative to oversee step 3 grievance proceedings, and D, having delegated supervisory authority of the county board appointed positions and county operations. To capture the wide array of responsibilities of the administrator controller, the following motion would be appropriate. I will say that legal counsel did draft this motion.
And didn't you have a conversation just this morning, again clarifying?
Yep.
Could you please share with us that conversation?
Yes, so I did have a quick conversation with legal counsel this morning, right before the meeting regarding an email that was sent related to Court of Appeals opinions. And our legal counsel reiterated that this motion in front of you today is accurate and valid, that the Court of Appeals opinions that were placed in front of you really were situations where the manager was given full authority and decisions were not coming back to the Board of Commissioners. As you know, essentially everything I do, I'm coming back to you for the final step and authority to make those decisions. Whereas in those opinions, our legal counsel is saying that the manager or administrator was given full authority of the whole process and it never came back to the board for final approval. Whereas here in Benzie County, essentially everything comes to you for that final step.
So in layman's terms, we authorize you to be our eyes and ears.
Correct.
Bring that information back to us, whether it be in a closed session or open meeting.
Yes,
And we make those decisions based on the information provided to us.
that is correct.
This is not authorizing you to make decisions without discussions with us.
Correct.
Go ahead, Brenda, please.
I don't know. I am, in the last case that we just experienced, I know that, you know, we receive notification that cases are happening. I am concerned that we haven't been made aware of every step of the process. There are negotiations that happen within the county, and a lot of times when we go into closed session, we sit down, we talk about parameters, we talk about, you know, amounts that we aren't required to do in open meeting, and then that's brought to light after the fact outside of negotiations. I just want to make sure that this process is understood. Katie is not the board. We don't want to grant her the right to be the board, and you're
Right.
saying that's not happening.
Right.
But we also want to be really clear. Does this define that that the procedure is laid out? It's a lot of authority to give to you to negotiate.
You've already given me these, this is reaffirming you what you've done over the last 4 years. You adopted a resolution for authority of operations and to oversee appointed positions. You adopted a motion to make me the MMRMA representative before it was Dawn Alney for years. You've already done this. This is reaffirming those different actions. If there is a procedural change that you would like to see, I'm happy to make those procedural changes. I will say much of the procedural changes that have been made have been in the spirit of transparency and communication sharing. When the clerk's office was your member rep, you weren't even given an email of the claims. You were told at a board meeting to stop by my office if you want to see it. I send everybody the claim when we receive them every time. So I'm open to any change in communication or procedure. I'm fine with that. That's completely fine. But this is just reaffirming all the things you've done over the last 4 years. That's all
I
it
don't
is.
want to reaffirm them if we're not doing them correctly.
The legal counsel did review this. They didn't give us any different direction. Don't have to take action on this today, but I'd like to get other thoughts.
Looking at I was kind of a little bit of surprised that went into mediation. I had no clue that that was occurring. And that's kind of one of my concerns. Do I want to be the person there in mediation? Not necessarily. I'd like, you know, inform that this case is moving along, this is where we're at. It's gone to mediation at this point. It was kind of like a little surprising that we went to closed session and it's like, oh yeah, we're done with mediation. This is what our recommendation. I'd have liked to have had some information prior to that.
And we would agree with you, Katie.
Mhm.
I don't think you had been in any discussions on that either, had you?
No, that was the first that all of that had transpired. I actually reached out to the chair and vice chair just a couple of days before that mediation because I had to change meetings with them. And that was the first that I was being scheduled for that. I haven't had any, in this specific instance that we're talking about, I hadn't had any meetings or anything since the claim was initiated. It was handled between the attorneys up until that point.
Give the attorney the authority to do that?
Right.
Those are MMRMA appointed attorneys for those situations, who is our representative.
Let me answer the question different. Does this board give MMRNA, whatever that organization is, or that specific attorney, the authorization to do those things? for us.
I would have to get further clarification on our documentation as to what those say. I can tell you that what has transpired is no different than what's transpired for every other lawsuit who's under MMRMA.
So,
Which,
go ahead, please.
no, I just, in other meetings that I've attended, this exact issue has come up with
Yeah.
attorney use policies where attorneys shouldn't be acting on behalf of the county without us being aware and with permission to make these filings, to do these things. And it appears as though the MMRMA is just acting on their own accord on our behalf without us being aware of what they're doing. And if we have the opportunity to put something in place where we're aware of what we're being charged for, we're aware of what's being filed, they have to have permission first before they do it. I do think this would serve a good purpose and bring us more knowledge of what's going on with the county. We would have more knowledge about the process, and we have a retainer that we use that at the end of the day, all I'm aware of as a commissioner is it's gone. We used it. I don't have any documentation as what was charged for what to do. And it's twofold. It's about being charged and it's about the process and us being transparent as a board with what's going on. We want to know what's going on, where we're at in the process of these cases. And if we have a way to implement policy where that's required, or perhaps the MMRNA isn't required to follow those kind of policies,
No
I
ends.
don't know. They're not?
I said no ends,
Oh,
MMRMA.
MA, I'm sorry. I just, if there's a mechanism by which we're made more aware, we have more control about what tax dollars are being spent for these cases, we need to implement those.
So I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I talked to some of you individually about this. You know, with the number of years I have experience in working with attorneys, particularly attorneys that are given to us by insurance companies, we have to acknowledge that they are not always working in our best interest, in my opinion. And I unilaterally, until it comes up for discussion, which it is now, I had asked Katie that any discussions regarding these settlements, we talk with our general counsel about, because they are looking for our best interest. Now, I'm not suggesting that the insurance companies' attorneys aren't considerate of us. I just don't have that level of confidence. So the fact that we only learned about this lawsuit and the status of it in one closed session as we were being asked to make a decision isn't right. Now, the good news is it was a limited amount of money and, you know, it didn't expose the county to a lot of things. But going forward, we've got to correct that. And I'm going to repeat myself. It's my opinion that we should engage general counsel, at least for a period of time, to give us their opinion on everything that was being filtered through for us, to include at times that they're joining us on closed sessions, because we may not even know what questions to ask in a closed session. Now, I don't believe, by the way, that this motion suggests that Katie has carte blanche.
Right.
The only thing it's not addressing is the responsibilities of legal counsel, and that probably should be done under a different motion even.
So here's my process, and maybe some are forgetting when they're notified. So when I receive a claim, the claim is actually served to the clerk of the county. Tammy receives the claim officially. She usually stamps it with her stamp and she runs it down to me. I scan that claim in and I send it to Cole Stoker and Toski, and I send it to the MMRMA, who then assigns an adjuster, who then assigns legal counsel. You all receive an email of a copy of that claim. And if you search your emails, you will find a copy of those claims when they're received. So you're all notified of those claims. I have never once received questions back, except from Commissioner Cunningham in my 4 years here. So you're all notified of those claims. It then goes between the attorneys of both sides who are working through that. Typically, the sheriff's office is involved in these suits, so many a times under Sheriff Hubers is communicating with the attorneys to schedule his staff for depositions and other things that are happening in the midst. If it comes to time for mediation, we're then notified of that mediation, and then the mediation happens. It goes to closed session if there's any sort of settlement in there. Depending on the case, the attorney may want to hold additional closed sessions like we have for the other issue that's going on right now with Benzie County. We sat through regarding the suit regarding Mr. Winkle and Deputy Ismail. You'll recall we had a closed session to kind of brief on that one because that's a bigger claim. But that's kind of how it comes. It goes to the closed session, and then the Board of Commissioners ultimately decides whether or not they're going to accept the attorney recommendation or not. The change to the process I think I'm hearing from you today is that you want more communication, which is fine. I can send you more communication. I can track that a little more and send that to you that, hey, we've heard nothing, or hey, nothing's happening, or hey, they're looking at scheduling mediation. I will say though, I'm not always on the emails with the communications with the sheriff's office. And it's not a down drag to the sheriff's office by any means. That's because the attorneys are working directly with them to schedule their staff. I'm not involved in those different things. But if you want to know about those things, I'm sure the sheriff would be obliged to communicating that as well, that different meetings are being scheduled for whatever reason between attorneys and his staff when they're involved. As far as information from the MMRMA and assigning that legal counsel, I will indicate that they do have an approved list of counsel. And so typically they're recommending certain attorneys based on the claim at hand. But you can say you'd like to work with somebody else on that approved list. You cannot just go to any attorney that's not approved by the MMRMA, or you may face, no coverage at that. If that is something that you would like to do, we can try to amend that process. I think that's fine, but just know that we need to figure out how we're not going to slow things up in the process in general. So if I'm served on a claim tomorrow and we choose to cancel March 11th, am I now forcing any sort of attorney appointment until April? We got to work through that process too, if that's the direction we want to go. I don't want to slow things up and have it be our issue.
I'd like to make a couple of comments on this. First, that when I get legal papers, it's kind of like the papers that were on my desk this morning. I don't understand any of that. These are a lot of legalese, and so you may not hear from me because I don't even know what questions to ask at that point. And I am assuming that we're being represented fairly.
Mm-hmm.
What I think that we ought to consider doing, and I don't think that we ought to try to craft it in this meeting, but we need to have direction to legal counsel on what level of communication we have, regardless of who appoints them. If we make the decision to not accept the insurance company's legal counsel's recommendation for a settlement, you need to understand you could end up on the hook for it.
Correct.
So when I talk about them serving our best interests, that's why I'm not always confident they are. Christy, do you have any thoughts on this?
So I think I'm hearing a couple of things. I'm hearing one, what this motion is doing is it is just reaffirming what is already happening right now, what Katie is doing. And it sounds like there are other thoughts we may be having around what that process looks like, pulling us into the loop. So to me, it sounds like the discussion is more around process and not what is happening with Katie. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm okay to reaffirm what Katie does. And I would entertain looking at our other process. And I don't think it's a bad idea to engage another attorney. It sounds like it might be already part of the retainer, correct? So we
Yeah,
wouldn't
they're
necessarily
notified.
be incurring other costs, but we could be getting a benefit from that.
Well, and I know that Randy, you want to say something, but Katie, you and I talked about that retainer. It's not quite that simple. Why don't you explain how we arrive at the retainer for general counsel?
So we have an overall retainer that's broke out into different subjects. And so there's a smaller version of that retainer for collective bargaining, one for review of official documents, and so forth. And so we have a retainer on place for a certain level of work. just over 5 years ago, so it's just before I came here is when you all did an RFP to work with Colt Stoker and Toskey. That retainer was developed based on that time in place. Since I've been here, that retainer hasn't increased. And so at this point, there's no additional cost outside of the retainer that we're paying. But if we're going to be expecting more than what has been the general somewhat status quo, I do anticipate that the retainer would increase
Of course.
because we're utilizing them more, right? They developed their retainer based on use. I will say I'm using them a bit more, probably than some prior administration, just because I think it's good business to involve the attorney in every contract that you sign. That wasn't a thing before I came here. You just signed contracts. I require them to draft most of our contracts. I require them to draft a lot of our resolutions. So I am using them more than before. And if we use them more, just expect that the retainer could rise. I'm not saying that's a problem. I would expect the retainer to rise if we use them more. I'm hearing what you're hearing, Commissioner Trigg, as far as what we're kind of talking about here today. I'm happy to pivot in the process if that's what the board wants. But I do think we're going down two different trails here. It's reaffirming the practice, and then we need to critique the process.
I would make the argument, by the way, that we're investing ourselves when we use an attorney. It's
Sure,
not an expense.
better word. Yeah.
You want to say something, Rhonda?
Yeah, I think it's more than a dual conversation we're having here. I see three prongs in this. I see us trying to reaffirm what we're doing. And I caution us right now. We've been given case law walking in this morning that while we can say our attorney says that that's not the case right now, there's nothing that says that we can't have this conversation, pause for a minute, and reaffirm this at the next meeting after we say, look, we've been presented with this case law. Is there any impact this is going to have that we should be looking at that we don't understand right now? We're still going to function as a county. I want to do this correctly. The second thing I see is the need for an attorney use policy. Will it matter? Will it stop the process? If you get a case and something needs to be approved to go, I mean, these are legitimate flow of information, flow of the process, things that have to be considered, but we are also charged with making sure we have $100,000 retainer-ish with our insurance attorney. I have no idea what that was spent on. Is that okay? Is that something that we can be, if we're accountable for the money? And now we're talking about threefold, having our county attorney oversee our insurance attorney, which again is another budgeting cost issue. Is it prudent? I don't know. Perhaps until we get a system in place that we all feel comfortable with. But I think that there are a lot of issues that are being brought to light here that we could end up with a better understanding, operating more efficiently, operating more fiscally responsible if we just slow down for a minute and make sure we do it correctly.
I will
We do have an attorney use policy. It's in the board policy.
board rules.
I think
For
it's
board
in
rules.
our use of the attorneys. It's not, it's in who can use the attorney on the county side. It's not directly
Correct.
impacting our relationship with the attorney. An attorney use policy in that you need approval to do certain things before you charge us for them.
So
And we need to be aware of certain things before you move forward.
Yeah, so our board rules are specific to our general counsel and, you know, who can contact them and such. So yes, it'd be very different. I do want to make it clear that our general counsel would not be overseeing the insurance attorney. That's not how it would work. And they made that very clear to us that it's not an oversee situation. It'd be nothing more than an extra set of eyes on the claim, and maybe they ask an additional question. So I just want to make that clear. It's not an oversee situation.
In fact, they were real clear with us that they're not in a position to make recommendations on what we should settle. They said your legal counsel will have better information than that. Well, what we agreed on is, look, if there's questions we should be asking
Mhm,
that we're not, we're interested in you prompting us to ask these questions.
mhm.
Evan, you got some thoughts on this?
Basically kind of what Commissioner Trigg said. We already do all these things with Katie. We're reaffirming these things. Something was placed on our desk this morning, but we've already talked to the attorney and the attorney crafted this language and I would trust the attorney that this would be an appropriate motion. The other things that we talked about are, are different issues than this, but it's all need to be discussed, but I'm ready to move forward with the recommendation with.
And I think there probably is some follow-up on this,
Mhm.
because you cited a couple of different other issues. Gary, anything do you want to comment?
Only thing that I see in this that hasn't happened. Mediation was done without Katie even being there.
That's not true. There's a typo on the
Oh,
mediation. Katie
okay.
Kazim should be Katie Zeit on those
And usually
documents.
mediation is dictated by the judge, correct?
Correct.
So you don't really have a whole lot of choice.
Yeah, the judge
One or
ordered
twi-
the mediation.
The one time I was involved in it, the insurance company bring their own adjuster in there. They tell you basically, well, do whatever you want, but this is what it's gonna cost you if you go any farther.
Yes.
I just felt that the way this whole process went, this board was not informed completely and gonna make a decision. I think we need all the information.
The good news is we're learning from this. The good news is we had a concerned citizen that was willing to elevate it to us and know that we should look at it further. So there's some positives that come out of this because we don't want this happening again.
Right.
But what's your pleasure, folks? What do you want to do with this information? Does someone want to read a motion? Do we want to pass on it? What do we want to do?
I think we need to do this motion.
Then I'd invite you
I'll
to,
read it.
please.
I move that the Board of Commissioners ratifies and reaffirms its previous designation of the county administrator, controller as its designee to represent Benzie County, A, as a public information officer, B, as a disciplinary and grievance proceedings, C, mediation, court, and settlement proceedings, and D, delegated supervisor authority for board-appointed positions and of Benzie County operation.
Do we have any support?
You do, I will support.
Have we talked about it enough?
I
I'm
would
just
like,
gonna reiterate that this for me is just premature in light of what we've been presented with. And if, we share with Matt, Cole, Stoker and Teskey, what we've seen this morning, and he says, I absolutely stand by based on these cases and what the motion says, I would be willing to support it. But at this point, I'm a little uncomfortable.
Didn't you say you already did that?
so I sent it to Cole Stoker and Toskey. I actually spoke with Tim Perrone. Tim Perrone is also the person who drafted this language in this memo. I sent him the email that we received this morning. I let him know that there was documents placed on the desk. And I had the conversation with Tim Perrone, who said that he was still comfortable moving forward as is. But I am hearing that I should bring forward some sort of process that goes along with this, some change to the process. That's what I'm hearing I should do.
Let's act on the motion and then we'll have a follow-up on that, okay? Any other comments or questions?
My only comment is we need this. We need somebody accountable. As far as I know, Katie is the,
I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that we need to make sure that there's nothing that this pressure cooker that we're under with, and we have a motion and support. We're going to take a vote. Didn't have to happen right now. We could have all come to the table feeling comfortable in light of new information. And until we affirm that, and I know a phone call was made this morning, it's just not enough for me. I'm sorry. And Katie's going to continue to do what we're reaffirming actions that are already taking. I just want, again, I'm saying the same thing over and over again. When new information is brought to light, I think we need to thoroughly understand what's trying to be said and make sure that the answer we've been given is the correct one. And it's nothing against Katie or the job she does for us. She is highly competent, always a professional. I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying I want to make sure that what we're reaffirming in the way that it's written doesn't fly in the face of what was put on our desk today. That's
Christie,
all.
you looked like you wanted to say something.
Rhonda is kind of convincing me. I'm feeling, is there any problem to just looking at this a little more? Maybe throwing it to a study session and looking at it and then putting it back up for vote? Is that, are we jeopardizing anything by waiting a meeting?
So I'm gonna wade in on this.
Sure,
I believe that we need to memorialize this today.
okay,
And that it does it does require further review, just like we need to look at our attorney use policy and probably modernize that. We need to have some kind of official position with attorneys that represent us and about the level of communication they have. But what we need to accomplish today, based on conversations I've been in, is to clarify for the record that we did have representation in those discussions, that they were authorized earlier to do that. We're just restating it now. That's really all we're doing.
so.
This is not, it doesn't mean that we can't review the process going forward. But we've been challenged on whether or not Katie had the authority from this board to represent us. She did, but it's fragmented. It's not in one single clean motion. It's been done over the course of years.
So if needed, if we are still not comfortable, we could put this on another agenda and tweak it if needed.
I'd be in favor of that myself.
I'd like to. go for them.
All right, vote's being called for. We're gonna do this by roll call, please.
Worsakki.
Yes.
Sauer,
Yes.
Trigg,
Yes,
Janat,
Yes,
Markey,
Yes.
Nye.
No,
now just to conclude this, are we in agreement, though, that we want to revisit this? We want to revisit our attorney use policy, and we want to take up the issue about how the attorneys communicate with us?
I don't want to revisit this. We just voted on a motion for it, but the other two things, yes.
And I would say rather than revisiting, because our attorney use policy is very specific in your board rules for our general counsel. I think what Commissioner Nye was getting at is the other attorneys and how they charge, and those, it's outside of our contractual civil counsel is how I interpreted it. So it'd be a separate new attorney use policy. Is that what I understood correctly?
I think we're not reinventing the wheel. I
Correct.
think these documents are out there. They're used by other entities and we need to look at them and see if they
Yeah.
would serve Benzie County well. And
Yes.
then in our internal process, I think there needs to be a formalized process for court cases, and especially in the area of negotiation. And at what point in negotiation are we informed, are parameters set about what the county is willing to offer? I mean, it's a negotiation where I feel like we were brought in at the tail end and kind of told where it landed. And
That an MMRMA issue.
I don't know. And if
But
it
they
is,
assign the attorney.
right, if it is,
and
we
by
need
the
to
time we
understand that.
Find out about it, parties usually over. Yeah.
Well, we were informed that the mediation was occurring.
Get the Friday before it happened.
Yeah.
And it happened on Tuesday.
I don't think anybody's disagreeing. This can't end up on an agenda. And let's work through it.
So I will work to see if I can get some attorney use policy drafts and work with Matt to craft one, or Cole Stoker. And then I'll work on some sort of procedure per se on communication with the MMRMA and attorney. Am I getting everything?
And I don't know how it'll apply to this, but the building authority at one time had to develop a attorney use policy.
Mhm.
We might want to see if that documentation's laying around anywhere.
I can look and see what I can find.
And I do think it needs to be a future conversation of this board, whether we want Matt, Cole Stoker and Toski reviewing all the actions of the I don't know if that's the right word, because you said that's not what they're going to be doing. They're not overseeing them, but it was suggested that they have eyes on what the other attorneys do, and that will come at a cost. That's a
Right.
budgeting issue. So
Yeah.
that has to be a conversation as well.
Yeah, so because they're already receiving the claims, I send them to them as well when I send them to the MMRMA. But they're not asked to respond, essentially. I'm sending them to our legal counsel as an FYI, like, hey, this is about to be happening when I send it to the MMRMA. So they're being notified, but if there's an expectation back of that notification, yes.
And I'm not suggesting we use them every time we turn around, you know, I think there's gonna be select times we use them. But let's save that discussion. We'll get this on an agenda item for another day.
Yep, I have it on my agenda list, a discussion regarding process and procedures for communication, claim communication and attorney communication to the Board of Commissioners.
Very good. All right, great conversation, folks. You want to introduce the next subject, Katie?
Yep, let me get to it. So the next one is a letter of understanding for the POAM EMS unit. So as you know, we have collective bargaining agreements across the county, 6 groups to be specific. And within those collective bargaining agreements, there are certain instances where between the department head and or elected official and administration, they can warrant a higher step starting on the scale if experience is there or there's prior education or what have you. And so in the EMS contract, they're requesting the same, is to allow for starting at a higher step on the scale that's established in the collective bargaining agreement based on prior education and experience for the position at hand. This has been memorialized for quite some time. The sheriff and I have worked together and a few different corrections officers and such to start those on higher scales with prior justification. And so EMS is looking for the same.
So I'll make a motion that the Board of Commissioners authorizes a letter of agreement with the POAM Paramedics and Emergency Medical Technicians Unit, which allows for step placement above the start step and authorizes the chair to sign.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Can we do this on voice or is this roll call?
It's an agreement, so it should be a roll call.
Call, please.
Sauer,
Yes.
Trigg,
Yes.
Worsakki.
Yes.
Janat,
Yes.
Markey,
Yes.
Nye.
Yes.
So the next item in your packet is EMS again. This is an ambulance purchase. So we purchase ambulances on a schedule, and because it takes 18 to 24 months to actually produce the ambulance, we have to order it a bit in advance. You will recall that we approved the purchase of an ambulance in the 23-24 fiscal year. We're going to be taking possession of that ambulance finally here this coming spring. So the purchase of the ambulance now would be to take possession of it in 26-27, but there's such a lead time. Money is set aside for these purchases, so I'm bringing it before you for the purchase. It's $249,000. I know some of you are probably curious, but the last one we purchased was $219,000. And so it's a bit sickening as to what they charge for these vehicles, I may say. But it is funded. And it is they're on replacement schedules. We don't replace them based on mileage. Typically, we have some that go quite a ways. I know that Tom and his staff are really good about the maintenance on these vehicles. We've rebuilt engines. We've tried to buy used in the past to, limp things along. And this is the best route to move forward.
I must say, we do put a lot of miles on our ambulances.
A lot of miles.
I'll make a motion that the Board of Commissioners approve the purchase of one 450 ambulance from RSVP Inc., not to exceed amount of $249,000. The funds available in Fund 210 Ambulance Fund authorizes the board chair to sign the necessary documents for purchasing and taking possession of the unit.
Any support?
Trigg will second.
Opening up to questions or comments?
Is RSVP Inc. the only provider of ambulances?
I do think that for continuity purposes that they want to do the same, so they have all the ambulances are the same.
Gotcha.
Is that correct, Tom?
We are trying to get away from a yellow ambulance in addition to a white ambulance. That is part of that.
Pardon me, I have a cold.
traditionally, yes, you're looking for large purchase items, you want 3 bids. And when it comes to healthcare, tends to be a little bit different. When it comes to purchasing ambulance, there are a lot of ambulance providers out there. People buy ambulances from Canada, California, all over the place. Comes from Ohio is the manufacturer actually is in North Carolina. And the middleman agents are out of RSVP is out of Ohio. We've gone with them. When we first started utilizing them, we got bids from numerous different companies, and RSVP gave us what we wanted at the best price. Generally, ambulance companies stick with one provider or supplier for their ambulances instead of trying to reinvent the wheel over and over and over for continuity and consistency in what you have. You want your ambulance to be the same. So once you've crafted the design of your ambulance interior wise and what's expected, you want to stay with that so people can go from one rig to the next rig to the next rig to the next rig, because you always have one out of service and they're not scratching your head going, where is this? Where's this? And where's this? Because every ambulance is going to look different on the inside. So that is one key reason why you stay with them. Second, 2 years ago, when we went out and wanted to get bids, ambulance services or companies know that, especially municipalities, that periodically they have to go out and do bids. And they refuse to give them, or they give a bid that's astronomically high because they know you're not going to go with them anyways. Everybody knows we use RSVP as our supplier for ambulances. So at Delzio, he would go out and he did bids 3 years ago, and the responses he got back is, we're not giving you one because you're not going to use this anyways, or here's one for $325,000. So because they know we're not going to go with them, we're going to go with RSVP. So it simplifies, stay with the company that, unless something were to change where they were to all of a sudden go, whoa, you were so far out of line. And we don't buy ambulances with all kinds of extras. Now they're obviously supply and demand, costs, everything goes up. Every year your ambulances are going to be a little more expensive. But we don't redesign and have like a special looking ambulance on the inside that has all specific types of cabinets. There's very few things that we require that are different than a stock ambulance that comes off the assembly line. So the value is a fair value. You're not going to find one cheaper or much cheaper unless you wanted to go with a different type of ambulance, I guess, per se.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions?
Don't we normally move equipment from the old ambulance to the new?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I mean, that's another reason we kind of stay with this.
Yeah, in fact, we're not buying, we have all power cots in all our trucks. So all we have to do is this one will be, when it comes, it will be set to have a power cot mount put in it, and the truck that comes out of rotation, which 2 years to figure that one out, the mount for that power cot will come out. So in the new one, they have a guy that comes up and does it right at station 2, and then we slide the new I power think cot right in. Gary's getting at is a remount where they actually take the box off the back and put it on a new chassis.
You can do that. There's not a whole lot of savings. There can be. In the future, that could be something like maybe after this one, I can look at that as an option, because I'm sure that RSVP does do remounts. So I can get a bid and see what the cost savings would be on remounting a box. You can only remount a box to a certain age in Michigan. I know that. I do not know how old the box can be, but it has to be within a certain age to be remounted. So, but that is something that I can look into for the future.
Thanks,
You're
Tom.
getting
I
at?
think. Huh?
Is that what you're asking?
Well, kind of. I mean, it reminds me of the road commission by a frame. All the equipment gets moved over. And over time, it saves you a lot of money, but if it can be used.
Yeah, like we're not buying, the ambulances don't come with a new heart monitor. They don't come with suction units and all the equipment that we carry.
Mhm.
All that gets taken out of the old truck, put in the new truck. Equipment, like a few years, we're gonna have to replace heart monitors. That's a $200,000 purchase, but
we still got a few years yet on ours.
Other questions or comments? Two then, had you already considered the possibility of moving the box to a new frame?
That came up in discussion several years ago, and there wasn't a whole lot of cost savings, but nothing to preclude us from looking at that in the future.
Okay, I'm gonna leave that between you and administration.
Okay.
But because it came up today. And secondly, funding this purchase, how would that impact, if at all, what we need to do over in Frankfurt at the station? Does it affect, would we still have money to?
No, because this is a line item in the budget that's actually funded
Mhm.
every year.
Okay,
It just sits there and then it gets used every other year.
very good. Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right, let's do a roll call on this, please.
Jeanette,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Nye,
Yes.
Sauer,
Yes.
Trigg,
Yes.
Worsakki.
Yes.
Thanks, Tom. Katie?
So the next item on the agenda is the establishment of the Tax Advisory Committee. We have talked about this very briefly over the last couple of meetings that this would be coming to you for consideration. As you know, we were successful last year in removing the word indefinite from our general operating millage. And when we removed the word indefinite, we put a 2026 expiration. So that forced us to have this conversation coming in the future. So what's in front of you today is to adopt the resolution, which is going to establish the committee itself. Most of the positions are actually statutory, so you don't really have a lot of say in who gets to serve on that committee. The county treasurers by default, which would be Kelly Long, the chairperson of the finance committee of the board of commissioners or designee, you do have a say in that one. The intermediate school district superintendent or their representative, they'll determine that. A resident of a municipality within the county who shall be selected by the probate judge. Judge Mead is going to select that person. He selected Mandy Gray Rainier last time, and I believe that's his decision again. A member not officially connected with or employed by any local or county unit who shall be selected by the Board of Commissioners. This is your say, and last time you chose Randy Rice. A member who shall be a township supervisor and who shall be selected by the majority of the township supervisors. Last time that was Jason Barnhard after I called a meeting with as many township supervisors as I was able to. So by you adopting this resolution, you're going to establish this committee, and then we'll bring back any members that need to be confirmed once we have heard from everybody on that committee. This process does have to be set in motion by April 1st. And the reason it's in front of you today is because we're going to be having a discussion regarding the March 10th meeting. And we wouldn't have another meeting until April 8th after that, which would then preclude us from adopting this resolution. We have to work to establish this committee by April 1st. And so that is why it's in front of you today, is to set this in motion.
And although we're establishing a committee now, this is really a 2026 initiative.
Yeah, so I believe that time should be in our favor. And so I want to get this committee going and get the conversations happening, because there is quite the educational campaign that's going to need to take place in Benzie County regarding our general operations millage. We made quite good headway when it was on the ballot last year, but there's a lot of work still to be done.
Krista, you had some questions. Have they all been answered for you?
One was regarding the be it further resolved.
Yeah, so, I mean, yes and no. I mean, so I understand, this is in regard to Headley. I understand that. I'm not entirely sure what this committee is doing. And I put in there, you know, I see it says this. But I don't know. I'm not entirely sure.
Wait, can I answer that?
I'm saying, do you want to, or do you want me to?
Well, I think what the committee is going to do is, so on this, prior to the voters removing the indefinite expiration date, where our general operating millage continually rolled back from 5.29 and we're currently at 3.2 or 3.3.
3.3.
The advisory committee would weigh all of the information and then come back with a recommendation whether to keep the general operating millage where it is or to ask for an increase, would be the question at the end of the day.
Yeah, so this committee, so there's two different committees. There's the tax advisory committee and there's the tax limitation allocation board committee. The allocation board determines the allocation. So there's a set amount of millage numbers that a county can have, and they determine what allocation goes where. So because there's money that goes to the townships, to the county, and to the school, the ISD. So the allocation board determines the levels of who gets what, right? And that was determined back long time ago. You know, the county got 5.29, the townships got 1.21, and so forth. The advisory committee does not have the authority to change that top number. They only have the authority to make a recommendation to this board as to whether or not they want to reset up to that top number or change the language, like removing indefinite and adding the 2026 language. So this committee is going to be charged with making a recommendation to this board, who has the ultimate say as to how we should proceed with our millage. So in 2026, when we have an election, on the ballot will be millage language, and it could be any array of avenues, right? It could be to just to renew for 2 more years or 5 more years or what have you. Or it could be to renew and reset up to 5.29 or up to 4 or up to whatever. So that's what this committee is going to be charged with doing, is making the recommendation to this board as to how we proceed.
Okay, and
Ask it again.
because in my mind, in my mind, so we just did that millage, right? Where we said that everything was this and we wanted this, and our general fund is kind of set. And
Mhm.
so the other, like the townships and the schools, I mean, they go up for millages as well. And
Mhm.
so I don't think I have the big picture set in my mind. So if the top number, so the general can't be changed, we can change what goes to townships and schools.
No, you
I
cannot
guess
change
I'm
the
not
allocation.
understanding.
Sure. So you cannot change the allocation. So the top number for the county is 529. The top number for the townships is 121. We can't change that without the allocation board. What we can do is renew up to that top number.
I see. So because Headley rolls back things. And so
Yep.
I think, okay, so let me see if I've got the big picture now.
Okay.
Right? So, Headley was trying to say, hey, let's not, make our property taxes increase so much faster than inflation.
Yep.
So let's kind of roll that back and let's kind of bring that back down so that our taxpayer isn't overburdened with inflation. Like, I think it had happened in the 70s, right? And inflation was going like this. And so it was like, hey, wait, we got to bring this down.
It's to equal the intent was to equal the playing field.
Right. To set a maximum of 5% on the taxable value.
Yep.
Or the rate of 5% inflation.
And so what's happening now, right, is that we say we want this X amount, but because of inflation and whatnot, and this kind of cap, we're not getting that X amount. And so there is a shortfall.
Well,
Yes.
I think do you want, or can I just say,
Go.
so this indefinite that was on here, I don't think it was intended by the board. I don't think they understood the consequences of this word. And so other entities, Manistee County has an expiration date that we have now of 2026. Each year, their maximum, they go back to the voters and say, okay, it's been X amount of years. Can we reset? And the voters say, sure, this is what we're used to. This is what we do. We've never had that opportunity to reset at an amount that was because of the indefinite word. We just kept rolling back and could never put it to the voters to say, hey, do you mind if we adjust this back up because of the rollback? We didn't have that mechanism in place.
Okay.
And so, and it doesn't mean we have nothing to, I mean, we can stay where we're at. if the board decides that's a recommendation of this is the amount of money that this millage would generate based on the 3 wherever we're at right now, 3.3, they could make that recommendation, or they could say, based on the needs of the county and the services we provide and the influx of people, it's a better bet to ask that it be renewed at 4 mills. That's the recommendation. They'll come to us with us. But prior to this being changed at the last election, we couldn't even ask the question.
Okay. Okay, I think I'm getting a better picture. And so this tax advisory board is going to tell us, give us basically a recommendation. We probably need to, maybe raise our millage or not. Okay, now I understand. Thank you. I apologize.
No,
I wasn't
no.
getting it.
No.
Did you read the, I sent you the presentation?
I did.
Okay, good.
Understand, I like I said, I kind of understand Hadley, and I get that with the library, and they teach me all about that. I do kind of get that, but I didn't understand what this board was doing in regard to that. And so this is just a recommendation to us.
The Board of Commissioners has the ultimate say on whether or not what goes on the ballot. This board is kind of, I don't want to say the gophers, but they're the fact finders to develop a recommendation to this board for ultimate approval.
This makes sense to me. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't have that big picture.
Christie, good questions. All of us, some of us have been talking about this since 2017. So we've got much more history. You're trying to get caught up quickly. We get that. Any other questions or comments?
I'm gonna make a recommendation, a resolution 2025-10 to alter the fixed separate tax limitation and create a county advisory tax limitation committee be adopted.
Any support?
Markey will support.
One more chance for questions, comments, input. Go ahead, Gary.
Are we gonna try to use the same board, or are we gonna ask other people? I have been asking. That possibility or no?
Well, it's not a decision we need to make today, but I would say this, that the county has never, at least in 4 decades, has not had a tax advisory board. And the one time we used it, it took those folks a while to get up to speed about what their job is. And since that was only a year ago, do we want to start it over again? Do we want to use
You can
people
go
with
back in
experience?
the records in the clerk's office, see how the tax allocation boards worked in the past, and they just completely dropped it. So they did not work in the past. I'm just asking, should I be asking people if they're interested to serve or not? That's all I'm asking you.
I will say you only have control over 2 members of the board. So even if you decide to change your 2 members, the board would drastically look the same, most likely. Because Kelly Long is still your treasurer, so she's going to be on there. I anticipate the judge choosing the same individual. I anticipate the supervisors choosing the same individual. So even if you decide to change your 2 members, it's vastly going to be the same, most likely.
Well, I'm just wondering, should it be offered? Have you reached out to these folks yet?
I have not reached out to Mr. Rice yet.
So again, these are decisions that can be made later, but we need to formalize this in order to act on it in 26. There's no other questions or comments. I need a roll call on this, please.
Markey,
Yes.
Nye,
Yes.
Sauer,
Yes.
Trigg,
Yes.
Worsakki.
Yes.
Janat.
Yes. I'll introduce the next subject real quickly.
Okay.
As a result of some comments and concerns we've had in the last 2 to 3 weeks, I talked with Katie, I talked with Rhonda about the potential in April of having another session, because it's been very long since we've done it, a session on open meetings, FOIA, how we use Robert's rules, how do we interact with our attorneys? We talked to Matt about it. He said he'd be willing to put that on. So this is kind of what we're proposing. Rhonda, do you want to add anything to that?
I think you covered it well. I think it's a informational session that would benefit the board, and I'm in full support.
What's the language that Matt used? I forget. It's not a study session, but in any case, there's no decisions being made at this meeting.
Right. It's a conference. It's an educational seminar or conference.
It's just to educate ourselves.
Mm.
And again, it's been a while since we've done that. We don't really need to, I don't think we need to vote on this. We just need to acknowledge that we're going to do this sometime in April, and it will be a special meeting potentially.
Mhm.
We have talked about doing it under a study session, but because we don't know what a study session's agenda looks like right now, we don't know if we can do that or not.
I also think it would be more beneficial to have it stand alone. There's going to be a lot of information, and we're going to come with a lot of questions. And I think it's just going to be a great opportunity to get a better understanding in some areas.
Because I'm going to give the example, and this is not a criticism, but when we did the master plan or strategic plan, I don't remember which, we're going to get them confused. We were doing that at the conclusion of a meeting.
Correct.
And so then we were spending another 2 to 3 hours. And after a while, there's only so much you can do to hold someone's attention. And that's why it's being suggested that we treat it separately.
Mhm.
Is there anybody that wants to weigh in on this that feels differently?
I think it's a great idea. It needs to be evening meeting to me. Invite the townships. Anybody that's interested, because we've done that before. Been a long time since we've done it. Those kind of things are very informative. I'd like to see it done.
Good point. Anybody else have a comment on it? If not, we'll move on then to the study session meeting attendance.
Regarding March 11th.
Thank you.
So, March 11th is the next meeting of the Board of Commissioners. It's a regular meeting and a study session. Based on conversations, it looks like there may or may not be a quorum. If there's a quorum, it may only be 4 members present, which would preclude you from taking certain action at that meeting when there's 5 affirmative votes needed for bills and contracts and those sorts of things. So we wanted to have the conversation as to how to proceed with March 11th.
Rhonda, do you want to weigh in on this? Because that'll be your meeting.
I mean, our decision before us is to not have the meeting, and just move forward with our informational session as possibly a replacement for that meeting. Or we could go forward with a light agenda. I think everybody would agree that board meetings have a different feel when we know there's going to be several commissioners who won't be here. So,
It's very.
but there's a possibility we could have a quorum, but we're on a fine line.
In some things you need a super majority. So
Right.
you'd need 5. We know there's a possibility Tim won't be here. I definitely won't be here. Potentially Bob wouldn't be here. All we got to do is miss one more person and we already have a quorum. But we
Correct.
wanted to get that out as a discussion today.
Like the idea of a light meeting. I would forget the study session. Gotta have 5 to pass the bills.
So it would
That
be.
brings a different light to it.
So the meeting would be, we could do some informational presentation sort of things. We could approve things that wouldn't need 5 votes. So like our directory of charges, something like that could be approved, but contracts, financial transactions, those things couldn't be approved at that meeting. So it would be some of the more basic things we take action on. For instance, perhaps a letter of support regarding a grant application that could be 4 votes. So yeah.
And we won't know till what, early March?
I know
If
I
we'll
will.
have enough.
And I know Art
Oh,
will
you
not
and
be
Art
here.
are, yeah, you guys just got too much.
Mhm. Well, based on,
I'm not the one that went to Alaska, but okay.
Well, get
So-
paid for that.
so I obviously there's not a lot of details to be shared. But I'm just not sure about the 3rd commissioner and whether or not they'll be in attendance or not. I'd love to think that they will be.
So we've got the subject out on the table. Rhonda will be chairing that meeting. And what I'd recommend is that we leave it to Rhonda and Katie determine, what's your status as you get closer to that meeting.
Okay.
That'd be fine.
Comfortable with that?
Sure.
All right, let's move on to the next subject. Sheriff, this is regarding the patrol cars.
Thank you. I've had the occasion to speak to most of you regarding this prior to the meeting. Katie's prepared
Motion.
explanation and a motion. And I would entertain the
These are-
motion for questions
these are
or whatever.
budgeted?
Mhm.
However you'd like to handle it.
Make the motion that we purchase 3 new patrol vehicles not to exceed amount of $200,000. Funds available in the capital fund, and equipment replacement fund be approved.
We've got support with Evan. Opening up to questions, comments. Hearing none, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I just want to revisit conversation that the sheriff and I had. He was professional enough to reach out and have these conversations, I think, with most all of us. And my concern was about, it's pretty common knowledge that our officers, there's a portion of them who don't live in Benzie County. And so it's concerned regarding providing vehicles when they're being taken out of the county, this kind of thing. The sheriff was offered wonderful explanations for what that serves, but you had also talked about a policy that you're putting in place. And I asked if you could perhaps share what you're working on with us today, and you said you were prepared to do that.
Okay, so not having something a draft to share with you, to actually hand you.
Sheriff, can I pause just for a second?
Yes.
Is this likely to be a condition of the motion?
No, it's for informational purposes only.
Could we
Just to-
call for the vote and then ask him to address that then?
Sure.
All right, roll call, please.
Nye,
Yes.
Sauer,
Yes.
Trigg,
Yes.
Worsakki.
Yes.
Janat,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Sheriff, if you would, please
Okay.
address your question.
Thank you. Thank you for your support. So moving forward, my hope is to have a draft in the next 2 to 3 weeks available for legal to look at. I'm not reinventing the wheel. Many of our neighbors have such a policy, so I'm just taking pieces of it and making it ours to line up with our needs and wishes. That will coincide hopefully with our union contracts. As you know, there are things in there that also play a role. So the conversation is, as we move forward, having the ability to make the citizens safe in our community while, being frugal or being responsible with the funds as they're presented. It's a balancing act sometimes in this position. And often we are criticized on both sides of whatever decisions we make. Having said that, I think that at the end of the day, the draft and the policy that I'm preparing, because it's something that is out there in our community with our neighbors, having these things, it's commonplace to have these, have take-home cars and to have policies that spell out how that works, what that looks like, and how the officers are to be treated or treating the vehicles. In that, a lot of considerations have to be made. We have a lot of officers who do special duties that are called in at a moment's notice, and that's something we have to consider. We also consider things like our friends, our neighbors that we are in joint projects with. We have mutual aid agreements throughout northern Michigan because most of our agencies are so small, we can't have dive teams of our own. We can't have SWAT teams of our own. So we rely on others to help with that. And so we have to be able to respond to their needs as they respond to our needs. We've used SWAT and dive on numerous occasions in this county. And when that call comes out, it comes out over our phones and over our emails and over the lean system and dispatch. When that call comes out, people are racing to the scene from all over. Our coverage area is from Clare to the bridge, to the Mackinac Bridge for our mutual aid agreement. So we're relying on others to answer the call just like we would answer their call. So there's just a lot of things to consider, but I believe that we can all come to an agreement at some point in this endeavor, and that when you see the policy that is presented, it will make sense to you why we're doing what we're doing. And I think at the end of the day, everyone, citizens, commissioners, everyone wins with the policy that I'm about to propose.
And you've left us with the impression that we may see that in an April meeting.
Hopefully before that.
Well, we'll only have one meeting
Yeah.
in March, so.
Well, I can share that with you, you know, obviously leading up to any meetings prior to. So.
And when we get it, that'll be in draft form for our own input at that point.
Yes, that's my intention. Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
If they do develop, if he does develop a policy, it'll have to go through negotiation.
No,
Oh,
like you're talking about collective bargaining and negotiation?
yeah, is there
No.
something now in there or no?
So as the contract states now is that they'll have personally assigned vehicles, but they shall not leave the county. And so that's the part we're working to address.
My hope is to line them all up so that it makes sense on both sides. Thank you very much.
Thanks for addressing that.
Thanks. I appreciate everyone's attention and help.
You bet. Katie, you want to start the conversation about committee appointment?
Yes. So in your packet, you will see that the Benzie Transportation Authority has 2 terms that are expiring here in April. Seats are previously held by Jeanette Fahili as well as John Morse. John Morse has indicated he is not seeking reappointment. For the Benzie Transportation Authority, Jeanette Fahili is indeed seeking reappointment. We did advertise for these positions on our website. We also had published something in the Record Patriot. And to date, we've only received 1 additional applicant from Dave Davis, the Inland Township Supervisor. And then obviously Ms. Fahili has put in a new application as well. So what's in front of you today are 2 motions to consider. You could either reappoint Ms. Fahili and appoint David Davis, or you could hold an ad hoc interview committee. That really is your discretion as the Board of Commissioners. Our policy does allow for there to be simple reappointments if you've done your due diligence in seeking applicants, which I believe we have by publishing those vacancies.
Dave Davis is known to some of us. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, I know Dave. He's, I think he's applied for things before, and we may have interviewed him in the past before, but.
Road Commission.
Okay, and he also is the Inland Township Supervisor.
Correct.
So I don't have an issue since we did do our due diligence and he's the only one that put in for it. I would be fine, and I would make that motion that the Board of Commissioners reappoints Jeanette Fahili and appoints David Davis, each to a 3-year term expiring April 30th, 2028 on the Benzie Transportation Authority.
Sauer seconds.
We open it up again for discussion. Is this a voice or roll call?
Roll call's fine. Or voice is fine, sorry.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? All right. We're moving on to commissioner reports. And Christie, we're going to start with you.
Okay, so since our last meeting, I went to the Materials Management Planning Committee. Traverse City had not approved the new board rules. So we were kind of in a strange place there. But one thing that was really appreciative to me is out of that meeting, somebody asked, what is the goal here? And I'm like, thank God you asked that. It's a 45 reduction of waste to landfill. And so what they're working on, of course, is redirection to like recycling, compost, and whatnot. So we're working on a work plan, and there are going, and at that time there was going to be some more Eagle meetings. What I also understood from the board is that there seems to be maybe not some consistency in rules with Eagle yet. I don't think it seemed they hadn't quite found their footing yet, but I also went to a grant application webinar, and that was amazing for me to go to. It talked about that work plan that they talked about is actually our grant application. So how it works is that we put this work plan together. It only needs to be 1 year. And then that is then basically our grant application for receiving of funds. And they did talk about reimbursement. I think we've talked about that in the past. And what they said is that they would prefer that to be on a quarterly basis. And so we would give updates quarterly, and then they would reimburse us quarterly. And what they wanted to see, of course, is progress. And two things. Where did I put that? I don't know where I wrote that. I wrote that in here somewhere, but they wanted to see that you're working towards something. And so I think we can do that. So anyway, that was really good. Going to that webinar answered a lot of my questions. I also went to the Frankfort City Council meeting. The airport was there, Benzie Bus was there, a road commission. There was a lot of public comment around the 7th Street Beach, that large tower. They were asking for Frankfort to stop construction. Frankfort, however, had engaged with council, and so they said that they were not going to respond to any questions. They talked about how the Frankfort Fire Department received a 2% grant from the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians for a chest compression device. They talked about a car show in June and trying to make Restaurant Week in Frankfort better. They also did funding for the encrypted radios. They are also using a Michigan class fund. It seems like a lot of other municipalities are using that, and City of Frankfort is sticking their toe in that water. And they talked about municipal marina rates at Tier 1 and Rate 2. I didn't hear quite exactly what that meant, but that's their rates. I also went to the Crystal Lake Township meeting the very next night. Again, our friends at the Road Commission were there, and our friends from Bellows were there as well. They wanted Crystal Lake Township to revoke the permit for the tower. The administrator addressed the group, saying that Crystal Lake Township will not revoke the permit until they have good counsel to say that they can legally do that, because everybody is now in a legal quagmire. And yes, I'll just leave that there. They are also looking to update their blight ordinance. They approved a request by Ragnar. It's a group of bike riders to ride through Crystal Lake Township. They did mention that nobody even realizes that this Ragnar group rides through. They basically talked about how it was completely opposite of Iron Man. They reviewed their short-term rental ordinance, and they stressed that it's a police ordinance, not a zoning ordinance. They also addressed the Earned Sick Time Act, and they also are looking to have better communication with City of Frankfurt. The Economic Development Committee, the public comment, the Aquatic and Wellness Center is looking to the EDC to write a support for their grant. We had an update that broadband is 91% serviceable and billable. We had a draft structure of the EDC comments. We commented, again, we had some comments from both the Chamber, Honor Bank, and the HSC, kind of Grow Benzie, where it sounds like we could do a nice partnership. The Chamber and Honor are definitely willing to help us financially, and it looks like HSC has backbone resources, and so it looks like we might have some good partners there with the EDC. We're going to do a special meeting on, I did not put that in my meeting notes here. Thank you, March 6th. And that's what I have for that. I'm sorry, I went a little more than I intended, but I want to do every bullet point.
We're gonna explore that conversation a little bit anyway.
Okay.
All right, anything else?
No.
Any questions for Christie? Let's throw it to you.
Here, throw one at me.
I'm gonna throw it to you.
The floor.
Went to Gilmore Township, Weldon Township, Gilmore has a new, I don't know how to say this. It's like, anyway, a young lady that would like to be the clerk. See how that. Great. And they're looking for an assessor, so seems like everybody's always looking for assessors. I did attend the MAC Environmental Ag and Tourism
Thank you.
meeting.
Thank you. I'm not invited.
Not invited?
No.
Oh, well, Eagle was there.
Oh,
And they
good.
discussed the materials management, and then went on to say, well, everything's reimbursable. They will not buy property, but
Mhm.
they will.
Mhm.
They are giving Oakland County over $1 million to build a facility. We'll go from there. It was interesting. I didn't get her name. They were gonna send that stuff and I haven't seen it. But everything's reimbursable by Eagle's discretion. One of my concerns. They had a legislative update, and you guys have probably seen some of them. One of them that stuck out was there was a House bill that said if you didn't follow federal immigration laws, there was an opportunity you were going to lose funding. And the budget right now, it was a 3 to 6% increase for counties. I don't know if that's where we were or higher or lower, and of course, just being a budget doesn't mean we're gonna get it. That's how that goes. Also attended the Health Board of Appeals. We granted a mound system for the landowner. To me, it was a great decision, so I thought it went well. The Village of Alberta, they've been working on their budget. They approved their 25-26 budget. If I understand them correctly, because they were all patting each other on the back, they are finally out of the deficit reduction thing. So they have decent funding and the state's not overseeing them. So congratulations to those folks. They worked really hard to get there, and a long time coming. And the road commission was there. So they are getting out. I was also asked to write a letter of support. I will tell you about it. It's basically through Senator Peters' office to help pave the road up to the water tower. He'll write it and I'll sign it, so we'll go from there. But it's a good, they need to have it done. That hill is the one that washed out here a year or two ago and caused some real grief, and so that could be taken care of. I did set in on the EDC meeting. I know Art wants to talk about that. Just throw something out there. I think maybe that's a good use of the marijuana money. There's an opportunity there, and Christie did talk a lot about it, so I think it's good, and we'll talk more. Parks and Rec yesterday, they're gonna make a recommendation for Networks Northwest to do their rec plan, so it's kind of moving forward.
No, Sarah Kirk,
Sarah
not Networks Northwest, Sarah Kirk.
Okay, then I got it wrong. I knew I did. Cross that out. Anyway, that's when we're gonna hear about that, probably another month.
Our next meeting, yeah.
Anyway,
Well,
that's about
it'll be
all I have.
April, not March.
Okay. Sarah Kirk, I'm sorry.
Questions or comments for Gary?
We're good.
Gary, the only question I have is that letter of support you're being asked to write, are you doing that as an individual?
I'm doing it as the commissioner for my township.
Okay,
For the village of Alberta.
okay.
It's just, done them before. I don't ever do it on behalf of the entire mission.
And I'm not even saying we would be opposed. I just knew that it wasn't brought to the group, that's all.
Right.
Okay, no problem. Tim?
Where do I start? Homestead Township Board, fire chief indicated that the fire department pancake breakfast gonna be held April this year, every Sunday except Easter, that Saturday before. Normally that's been done in March. We're moving it to April for hopefully better weather. Township Sports finishing up their 2025-2026 budget. They're holding a budget meeting tonight, 6 p.m. Lots of fun. I encourage everyone to go. Central Wellness Network Board meeting, a lot of stuff going on there. Commissioner Nye and I are being a little bit involved in trying to get some support from our state reps, our senator, with regards to how Medicaid is funding the state of Michigan with regards. Has to do with waivers that they're having, how the state is handling it, no oversight of those waivers from our judicial, or not, but from our legislature. But it's more information on that to come, but we're talking about potentially wasting lots. Like for an example, state of Michigan submitted a technical 1115 amendment for substance abuse. But in that 1115 amendment, they put in that a lawsuit that is still not settled, trying to commit monies for that. Like, has nothing to do with substance abuse, but they're putting something in that waiver without any oversight. So that's coming on. Something really interesting. This is a little fun fact. Somehow, Medicaid decided that Benzie is an urban. We're dedicated as urban, not rural.
You ever been over by my place?
It has to do with square footage of land or square miles of land per person. And they removed all the wetlands or all the lakes.
Water. We were 7
water.
people over.
Leelanau is considered urban as well. Manistee is not.
I think Leland is urban anyway.
So that's a thing that we're talking to our state reps about as well.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's.
Time for a Walmart.
Which,
We're
You
urban, I
guys-
guess we need a Walmart.
You guys gonna put that Dollar General back then?
I don't know, I think we need to have some more fast food restaurants and all sorts of things coming in.
If we're urban, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah,
foodie
so
town.
that really will affect the funding from Medicaid.
Mhm.
Huge.
There's other impacts even.
Oh, yeah, so all the other agencies still recognize Benzie County as rural, but not Medicaid.
Okay.
We gotta get rid of 7 people, is that what I heard?
Or fill,
Are we making a list?
or fill in the lakes.
Well, we can do that both.
Geez,
So,
no kidding. And I just want to point out, I don't know if we talked about this before or not, but we have this program, a mental health sheriff program. That our CEO is going to to a conference in Washington DC. It's the National Association of Behavioral Health Directors. And he's actually going to be on, they're presenting our mental health sheriff program. He's actually sitting on a panel for that discussion. I attended the LPT. We did not have an LPC meeting this last month. We did review and accept emergency operations plans, annexes, E's, I, and J. That has to do with fire law, public work. We reviewed and approved new bylaws. Evidently, we never had bylaws. We also reviewed Rescue Task Force Unified guidelines, and they were
Questions for Tim?
Well, I left Florida in good hands for you next month when you go. I've been out of the state for the last 3 weeks, so I don't have a report other than it was sunny and 80 down there. So I hope you have the same weather next week.
Yep, and my report will look a lot like yours. If you would though, please, Dave Davis had an interest in being contacted after the meeting.
Yep, I'll give him a call.
Would you do you know how to get a hold of Jeanette?
I don't know if I have her. I probably have her email.
Okay, would you
Yes.
connect with her too,
Yep.
please? Because you're still a liaison. to
Yes.
that. Right. Rhonda,
Very good. Commissioner Markey covered Central Wellness very well with the federal waivers and our urban status as far as Medicaid. The other conversation that happened at that meeting was their personnel director was getting clarification on the new sick time hours requirement, and Central Wellness will be pulling from current PTO banks and to set those aside for that requirement. Just gathering information about how to navigate that instead of creating more time you can pull from ones that already exist. I attended the Village of Beulah. The businesses are struggling with no recycling. That was an epiphany for some, that those that are county bins are not for commercial businesses. And they are asking the village to set aside or find a spot where they can put a bin, and this will be at the business owner's cost. So the village had a consensus that they would support them in finding a spot for that. They reported that the NMCAA Art is assisting lower income village residents with their utility bills. Thought that was excellent news. They discussed the concept of a village manager. They passed a resolution, an ordinance, reducing the size of their board from 7 down to 5. That will be in a 45-day waiting period where somebody can come with a 10% petition to have that put to a vote, which could occur. But then the concept came up about a village manager. They said that the trustees in the village are spending too much time on day-to-day operations where they should be decision makers. I think we find that in a lot of our smaller entities, and they are exploring hiring somebody whose job it is to run the village and report to the board or ask for help when they need it. It might also have grant writing components to this position. They didn't make a decision at this meeting, but they are serious about exploring this, and it made sense. They are going to have a sewer plant with more employees for that, and somebody's going to have to oversee that, so. The other thing that happened was, I had a conversation with Tim Malone. This is, one of those things that come from having collaborative efforts. If anybody's been in downtown Beulah, you know, there's like a corner at one store where you can get cell reception if you stand in the right spot with your phone in the air like this. So I reached out to Tim Malone to see if he could come and talk with some of the business owners. That turned into attending a village meeting. And folks, sometimes timing is a really big deal, because Tim realized that with the village's non-point source grant project they're doing, where they're going to be putting basins in for the runoff in the village, this could trigger a dig once grant, which would cover up to 75% of the cost of putting fiber in the ground while it's open for the other project. It was like, so he presented the village with a lot of information. He attended with a representative from Elk Rapids, whose village had done a similar project, and he couldn't have spoken more highly about it. And so the village is moving forward with this partnership to look into it, to see if this is something that might work and they can improve the cell reception and get fiber to downtown Beulah. So I also attended the Health Department Zoning Board of Appeals with Commissioner Sauer. I couldn't agree more that I felt like the right decision was made. These folks were being told they needed a holding tank and had 3 mounted systems on one side and 1 mounted system on another side that had been working for decades. So I attended Benzonia Township meeting. Their joint board with Platte Township did not accept the Crystal Lake watershed overlay, to the dismay of many. And they didn't accept it in light of a projected ordinance rewrite. So we'll have more information on that as that moves forward. I attended the first interview for the HR generalist that we have open here at the county. 1 candidate was interviewed. We have 3 more interviews scheduled next week. I attended agenda review and AP review. I also was in attendance for the EDC meeting, which I understand we're going to have more of a conversation about. So I will hold my notes for that. And then I attended the West Benzie Joint Planning Commission meeting. This was deliberation of a zoning permit applications for storage units on 115 next to McDonald's Road. There is a developer who would like to put in over 600 storage units next to the between McDonald's Road and the solar panels that are up by the Crystal Lake Clinic there. And a lot of people spoke. A lot of public input. The majority was not in favor of wanting it. Their issues were the traffic that it would generate, lighting issues. There was concern there are wetlands on this property, disrupting the natural setting, the need for more storage units. Does that really exist? And then many people talked about so much impermeable surface so close to the river. The developer and the engineer spoke and seemed very accommodating. Since the first meeting, they had changed their plans to be responsive to some of the issues in the first place, and express the ability to be a good partner in what they're moving forward with. At the end of the day, it was decided that the developer needs to come back with either a wetland permit or a letter that there is no need for a wetland permit from Eagle. And that, and a driveway easement agreement in place with the neighbor. Once those 2 things are presented, at that time, the joint board will make a decision whether they're going to allow the development. That's all I have.
Good report.
I have one question for you. You brought up PTO. See in the health department packet for tomorrow, they're actually gonna change some of their PTO. So it is sick leave. Are we gonna have to do that here?
I'm going to address that.
Okay. Just, anyway, thank you again, Dana Michi.
I'm glad you brought it up because it is going to be addressed. Any other questions or comments? Just one quick question. I understand why the village probably wants a manager. Nothing really happens unless someone wakes up every day to think about it. But does Benzonia Village, do they have a manager?
They don't
They
at
don't.
this point, no.
And how about the Alberta? Or
City
Thompsonville?
manager?
No village manager.
Okay, so it'd be kind of breaking new ground.
It would be, and a lot of the tasks that happen at meetings, they fall on the treasurer and the clerk and any trustee who's willing to step up and take these over. And so it's having somebody with that hat on, I'd be interested to see how it works. I have suspicion that it might be a really good thing.
My experience has been that these people will pay for themselves. Save you lawsuits and all kinds of stuff. Look for grant opportunities. So good luck to them about that. My report's always presented in advance. I'd like to take this time to focus on economic development for Benzie County. I'm not going to give you the history because you've heard the history enough, unless you want me to get into it. But what we've been looking at now for about a year is what's the best organizational structure for our EDC. Our EDC right now is overseeing broadband, which I will tell you, I think that has been a huge success. This board made the tough decision about committing about $1.5 million to broadband. With that $1.5 million, we were able to attract, I think, over 15 million.
A lot, yeah.
A lot of money, and bring in professionals to help us do this. So we've seen one benefit of how we can use professionals. The county itself can't really afford a fully functioning EDC. If we're told, based on a specialist that we hired, who used to be the executive director for the Michigan EDC, that it could cost us $150,000 a year. So we're looking at what's the best way to organize that, have the county be engaged, but not carry the full responsibility of management and funding for it. In our last meeting, and again, there's been a lot of prep work up to this point. In the last meeting, we discussed a potential relationship with the chamber. A lot of the details have to be worked out about that. But before they moved forward, meaning the EDC, they wanted to get an indication of the county willing to make a commitment that's not needs to be discussed today, what that commitment would be, but would make a commitment financially to partnering with a private sector organization. And Norm Plumstead, who is the current chair of the chamber and also the CEO at Honor Bank, gave some very encouraging news because they've been talking about it internally. They said that they believe that they've got the ability to raise money to get to that 150, but they'd like to see us. In fact, it would be pivotal that we would be a partner in that. So I'm not looking for formal action, but I am looking kind of for a nod because they want to keep moving this forward. What the thoughts would be about the county being a partner in economic development, knowing we don't have to manage it, knowing that we don't have to carry the full financial responsibility of it, and the benefits we would get from it would be extraordinary. You're keenly interested in infrastructure. That is all about what EDCs do, is they move those kinds of things forward. And again, our example would be with broadband. I don't get it, quite frankly, but we're identified as the top 3 leaders in rural broadband in Benzie County. Now, based on my experience, I'm very impatient, and I'm thinking, really, how do we get that designation? But we do because we committed the resources to make that happen. So I'm going to pause there. Christy, you sit on that board. We had 2 commissioners that sat in the audience of that. Christy, starting with you, do you have anything you want to add to this?
The meeting just seemed like we have the backing we need to go forward. And again, utilizing the chamber and with them, private businesses. And then we also have our HSC. It seemed very positive. Everybody was looking to be at the table and wanting to help move this forward.
Rhonda, you were there. What's your observations? Good and bad.
I think it needs to be explored. I think the investment that we have made initially of the $25,000 for this consultant is a nod in and of itself. But I was appreciative of Betsy Evans drilling down on the fact that we need more out of the consultant. There needs to be a more a clearer plan for moving forward, and perhaps that's, he did say certain documents presented were just a draft. It's not enough right now to say, yes, we would commit X amount for X amount of years, but I can see it headed in that direction. I don't know what the organization of relationships are going to be. I think that the chamber is in the same situation that the EDC is. It's in an identity crisis and it needs to reinvigorate itself. But knowing that this is something that could change the trajectory for both entities, and especially with the commitment of buy-in from Honor Bank, which could lead the charge. The consultant also talked about a matching challenge to the community to get this going, but the deliverables, the projected outcomes, what this will accomplish, I think it needs to be clearer for people to buy in.
So I want to comment on that for a moment. I agree that the professional that we hired, and we were very direct with him, we think we need more substance in his paper. I'll call his paper a white paper. It's a good start, but it's more bullets than it is substance. Because for me to even consider this is, well, I want to see what the budget looks like. How is your money going to be used? We haven't gone down that road. Organizationally, what do we have to do to make that happen through another entity? What does a job description look like? How many hours a week are we talking about? There's a lot that has to be done yet, and we acknowledge that. But we're looking for the big partners are going to be the chamber, probably a couple of financial institutions, and the county. And lacking the funding for it, and by the way, I don't know if it's 150,000. You put that number out there, but nobody's satisfied me that that's a good number. But we're going to be a big part of that equation. Gary, your thoughts?
Well, I kind of talked to you yesterday a little bit, but the marijuana money to me, because you're looking at least a 5-year program. I think the EDC probably needs a restructuring because they don't really have a focus where they're going. Some do, some don't. And if we get buy-in from the community and the chamber, I think it's a great, would be extremely beneficial to Benzie County. I see it as a way of not going to change overnight. It's going to be a 5-year process to get started, but eventually we're going to see some monetary benefits from that. We're going to see an increase in tax revenue, those type of things, because we're going to bring in the right people. But still see the current EDC needs a restructure.
So my vision on this is that the county's EDC would have some members of that EDC on a board, but that the county's EDC would be separate. They would have the ability to go after grant money that non-for-profit wouldn't be able to do. Non-for-profit goes after grant money that the county can't do. So when you talk about the makeup of the board, you know, we're going to have maybe a couple people from our EDC board that would serve on yet a different board, because you need workers. It's been very clear to me that in order to make this happen initially, this is going to be all volunteer driven. We can't go out and hire somebody and say, go find your own wages or develop a plan for us. We need to do all of that. So we're a long ways from being able to hire somebody. But we also need people that have influence, contacts at the state level, can attract money. Everybody plays a different role. Some are workers, some are influencers. So all I'm looking for today, and again, it doesn't have to be formal, but I'd like to be able to encourage this group to say, you know what, if you go through the right process, yes, we can be supportive and not make a commitment on what that dollar amount is. because we don't really know what the need is. Or say to them, look, we think it's a great idea, but we just can't make that kind of commitment. Gary, I do continue to get educated by our administrator that marijuana dollars become part of the general fund. So, and you and I made the mistake many times by saying marijuana. That apparently is part of the contingency money. Is that correct? So it's not his own separate pot of money.
Right.
We could direct a portion of that to go to something like.
Right.
And to me, that I see a lot of benefit there, but you gotta have the right people in there to do it.
And you have to have the right plan. I mean, and that's what we need to see. You know, he talked about this being, you know, we've had a EDC in place since 1980, but this is essentially a startup, is what he called it. And some of the notes that I took were this could provide a point of information for business information. If you had a person to navigate the process, a partnership with leaders, hospitals, schools, utility companies. One thing I wrote down is that where Benzie County is logistically challenged for certain types of jobs. But what we do have is an idyllic lifestyle, you know, the fresh water, the recreation, zero natural disasters. We're looking for businesses to relocate here. It's, you know, our community is an easy sell on quality of life perspective. And we got to be thinking-based jobs, not industry, was one of the things that I took note of that was being talked about. So the concept in and of itself is of having a functional EDC with so much buy-in from bigger entities. And this is, you know, another public-private collaborative is appealing. We just really need to leverage this consultant that you've got on board to plan the path.
Well, we've already seen through the broadband what a public-private partnership does. Unfortunately, Tim Malone has been the driver behind that, but he's been a great partner. Gary, I know one of your initiatives that you'd like to see natural gas in your area. These are the kinds of things, again, that an EDC can do. We're in a unique time. How long the window will be open, I'm not sure, but the state of Michigan right now has what they call rural Michigan economic development or urban. Well, okay, we'll talk about that. But it's, so I mean, there's these opportunities that are lingering out there. So I guess what I'm hearing is that generally, yeah, you know, bring you a good plan and you think it might be worth funding. Don't bring you a good plan and no, it's not something you're behind.
Well, and I think I need to, you know, look at Katie and say, you have the BSNA that projects the budget. You know, is this something that we should be considering? Does this look like, with everything remaining the same, something we can fund? Or would this take some changes down the road?
It would take changes down the road. Like I've said before, we're really getting near to that point where things are pretty tight. You just look at our contingency over the last 3 years and it's steadily decreased. As to what we put into contingency is that, you know, rainy day dollars. And so, you know, but again, we're going to be looking at the general operating millage and putting it on the ballot, which has been a goal for eons. So in our current form, if we continue to roll back, we're going to have to cut something in the next couple of years. And so, you know, if we're successful with the community, then we have the funding. Even keeping the general operating millage the same and not rolling it back would help in that long-term stability of that. But it's the rollback that really, you know, it puts a damper on us expanding our services.
Sure.
And I want to be real clear. I mean, this could be a failure. I mean,
Yep.
maybe it doesn't work either. It takes, we talked about a 3 to 5 year window. The truth of the matter is, to be fully functioning, you need to be about 10 years out.
Mhm.
But it's like any other startup business. If I don't start seeing results in 3 to 5 years, I got to question how much more am I willing to invest unless I see daylight at the end of the tunnel. Don't expect much in the first year or two. That's kind of all organizational at that point.
Mhm.
But we get a chance to advance economic development in Benzie County for less than what it would cost us to do it ourselves.
Hmm.
And probably get better outcome. All right. Well, unless somebody wants to say, Art, I prefer you didn't deliver that message to them. I am gonna let them know that at the chamber, they can continue to move this thing along. I know they're looking at doing some partnering with Grow Benzie from an administrative perspective, so there's a different kinds of things that they're contemplating. And there's other organizations they're looking at also, but. All right, that's the end of my report. Katie, please.
Sure, just a couple of things. So I guess we'll get started first with the new sick time rules, laws that are out there. And I will say that we were accurate in our projection of something like this happening, which was part of the driving force of why we went to PTO. So we went to PTO in our policies. We agreed to that PTO policy within our collective bargaining agreements. And so really we're pretty status quo when it comes to those changes because our PTO policy covers us. So we really don't have much of an effect on that. Where we're kind of getting hung up on is the part-time employees and, you know, that whole tracking of the part-time employees, because we do have quite a few of those specifically with EMS. And so tracking them specifically, they did call out exemptions in the late hour when the governor signed regarding trainees, interns, variable hour employees, whatever that means. I got to find the definition of what that means. Young employees, so youth employees. So there is exemptions for those folks. So we're covered there. Seasonal employees, there's also an exemption for seasonal employees and how this applies to them. So that offered some more clear direction on how we handle, say, our marine patrol and our snowmobile patrol and those seasonal folks. They can actually use the sick time for 120 days. So we front load our PTO time based on a proration, and we have done that historically in Benzie County much longer than I've been here. And so because we front load the time, we don't have to offer the pay or offer the rollover. We don't offer a rollover now on anything outside of vacation. We do a payout at the end of the year and then re-front load. And so again, from that standpoint, our policy, because of the changes we've made over the last, 12-ish months, we really are meeting the standards of these changes from a sick time perspective. So there's really you're not going to see changes here really at all. So does that kind of address your thoughts?
Yeah, I didn't know if you had to, you couldn't just do PTO, you had to break it down into sick leave in spots.
So you can do PTO with the understanding that 72 hours of that PTO is classified sick, but it's still PTO. And so, but 72 hours of that bank are held to the standards of, the sick time policy, which is, if you're sick, call in. If I ask for a doctor's note, you got to give me one, those sorts of rules.
Health department policy in there was, ahead of time, they want 10 days or something like that.
Right.
If
Yeah.
you're gonna be sick. Well, I don't know.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, how do you plan sickness, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I guess some people can. So let me get to that section here.
Just want to make sure we're obviously.
Yeah. So 72 hours for us because we're considered a large employer, over 11 employees. We offer more than that in our PTO policy, so we're covered there. We do front load, which obviously I already talked about. For notification requirements, it does say 7 days for foreseeable usage. And then unforeseeable usage is either as soon as practical or in accordance with employee policy on using sick time. Well, so for instance,
You have an
if
operation.
you have an operation,
Yeah.
you have time to let that. Otherwise, it's as soon as practical or in accordance with our policy. So which our policy is as soon as practical, essentially. And then we can ask for a doctor's note if we suspect any sort of abuse in that. Mhm. So by us going to the PTO and the rules that we have set forth, we've really addressed these before they were even signed, which is great for us. We don't have to make a bunch of changes. So then staff isn't, worried about what's going on. And we'll be putting communication out to staff regarding that, regarding those changes and what our policies mean and how those factor into that. We'll get that out to staff here pretty soon. I'm having Cole Stoker, they'll help me craft the language on that so that it's clear as mud to our staff.
But you only have EMS as part-time? Some
No.
of them,
Yes,
is that an issue?
we also have a part-time, we also have part-time animal shelter attendants, the folks who help us clean. And then we have seasonal employees in our sheriff's office specifically. Every once in a while, we'll have, you know, a seasonal sort of part-time person in other offices to assist with, you know, scanning and, you know, those sorts of things. But we really, as a whole, we're a full-time agency, so we don't have a ton of part-time individuals. The EMS causes some thinking because we do have quite a roster of part-time folks, and typically we require those folks to pick up, you know, one shift every so many months, every like 90 days. We say you got to at least have a shift or we'll kick you off our list. So we have to work through some of that as well. Anything else on the sick time?
I just didn't know how convoluted it was.
The changes that we made really addressed a lot of it.
Explain to me how I'm gonna handle volunteer firefighters.
Good luck with that one. I think there is an exemption for certain volunteers, actually.
Exemption for a year if you're under so many employees. Then
Well, you have to have 10 or less. 10 or less is a small employer, but you still have to offer up to 40 hours of time. So if you have under 10 employees, you still have to give 40 hours of time. Over 10 employees is the 72 hours of time you have to give. But for seasonal employees, there's the 120-day exemption as far as they can't use it. You can also front load some of their time too if you anticipate their hours. It's pretty convoluted when you get into it. So that addresses that specifically. And like I said, we'll get communication out regarding that. Frankfurt Recycling, Dave and I have been working through Frankfurt Recycling location. Mr. Rainier is completely on board. Like I stated at the last meeting, he is very clear though that he doesn't want any sort of relationship with the city of Frankfurt and their officials. So whatever documents that come out, it'll be between us and Mr. Rainier and us and the city of Frankfurt if necessary. So just know that there will not be a three-way partnership at all. And that's just is what it is. So Dave and I are working through that. Paul Stoker will prepare the documents needed for that and to oversee that, and then we'll get them off the water, and that should be buttoned up. Broadband. So lots going on from a broadband perspective. Digital equity. You'll recall that we were given the half nod regarding mitten funding for digital equity and the educational piece of things. That's really caught up at the federal level. So that's a little bit of a waiting game. We're working through on some grassroots efforts to kind of address digital equity and training here in Benzie County that are at a low cost or no cost. So we're working through that. Cherry Capital Communication is working on a BEAD grant, as is our understanding. Ascend Tech and possibly Charter are also working on BEAD grants. We are working to coordinate to make sure there's no overlap in those BEAD grant applications. So they're not applying for the same addresses because, as you know, they're only going to fund each location once. And so we're trying to coordinate as much as possible so that these applications are aligning but not overlapping in asking for funding. Because as we know, Internet for All is our goal. And so we want to get there. And so we're being smart in how we're proceeding. The 91%, so 91% of what's considered serviceable locations is funded. Doesn't necessarily mean it's built out yet, but it's funded. So there's about 9% that we're looking at that's actually eligible for BEAD funding. So does that make sense to everybody? Okay, just making sure. So working through that, Tim Malone will most likely be asking for a letter of support for the BEAD application. Ascend Tech may also be asking for some sort of letter of support for that as well. We are working to put communication out to the providers to get some sort of snapshot as to what they've serviced or what they have funded to serve or what's on their plan, just so we can kind of have this picture of, okay, this is what we look like as of right now. This many houses have been connected. This many houses are to be connected. Because as you know, we have this private-public partnership with Cherry Capital. And so we're trying to get some high-level data from the other providers in the area so we can have a more all-encompassing photo of what Benzie County looks like. So still working through on that. I have asked for a pretty in-depth update for you as well as the EDC. So that is being put together to give you more of an in-depth written update as to all things broadband in Benzie County. But again, things are moving along. Infrastructure is happening this This thaw is wonderful. Things will get digging again. So good stuff happening there. As you know, Point Betsy was here at the last meeting. We had a meeting since then with Eagle about the changed application. That application has been submitted to Eagle, and so now we're in that waiting period, waiting for them to approve. In the meeting, Eagle was very non-committal as to, yes, you made the changes, things look good, we're going to get this through. It was very non-committal of thanks and move on. So we all hope that this is it. This is the ticket and we're going to get through Eagle. But I did not walk away from that meeting with any sort of positivity vibe either way. But again, I think Eagle's probably, they're hired to be non-committal in those sorts of meetings. So fingers crossed on Point Betsy, but everything has been submitted. So we're waiting, going through that process.
Changes were at their request.
Absolutely. So, but again, that's how I felt after the meeting.
They were.
Right. So as you know, our office is shorthanded, so we're working through a lot. We had an interview for HR. We have more coming up to hopefully get somebody in the office. But we are shorthanded, so we just ask for grace in the things that we're working on. Everybody got paid last week. That was our big, we had to get done last week and it happened. So yay, we won. Still working on different calculations for their different time off banks, because with the new contracts changed some time off banks. So working through those calculations, staff has been wonderful in giving us grace and some of the slow rollout of that. So we're really thankful for everybody for just giving us grace. All of our offices are a bit shorthanded. You see Lori's here today because that office is shorthanded. So we're just asking everybody for grace as we get through this weird time where people are shorthanded. Brienne has been alone a lot in equalization because we don't have staff down there. We're trying to get staff in those offices. So we're just asking for grace through all of this. Everyone's working really hard to keep everything going. But between people leaving and sickness and other things, it's been a weird time for Betsy. So just asking for grace in that. One thing that's super exciting that I wanted to give you a heads up is that some of the staff, we've gotten together a little unofficial planning committee, and we are working to host an Easter egg hunt for the community. We thought that'd be another fun community engagement thing. So we're tossing it around and chatting about it. And so if there's more to come on that, I'll let you know. But we're looking at hosting some sort of inside Easter egg hunt for the community. It's just another, thank you and plug to the community of, community, all the things. So kind of fun, kind of cute. Nobody wants to be an Easter bunny, but that's fine.
Well, eggs are too expensive.
So just another one of those fun things happening. Outside of that and working with legal counsel on various things, responding to FOIA requests and those sorts of things. Is there any questions for me?
How many FOIA requests do you get in a week or a month?
So it's really weird. We'll for a month or so get up to 10, 12 a week, and then it'll taper off and we'll get like one a week for a month or so. And then it's like 10, 12 a week again.
Okay.
It's really weird. As you know, our office handles FOIA requests for the majority of the county, and the sheriff's office handles their own FOIA requests. We do on some work together on the FOIA requests and present a joint response. But that's kind of where it is. So as far as that's my office specifically, I don't know the numbers for up the hill. The sheriff has left, but I think they get quite a few more than we do because folks are asking for police reports and things like that quite often. That just triggered my memory. You all were given a budget at a glance on your desk. It does have a brand new look and feel to it. So I will get mass copies made for you, but I hope you enjoy the look and feel of the new document.
On website address,
Was it-
.net.
Oh.
.net.
Well, good thing we only printed these 20.
Is there a way for me to get an electronic copy?
Yeah, I'll actually message Stephanie right now to fix the .net, and then we'll get it on the website, and then you can share that widely.
Don't want input or no?
If you want to give me input, we haven't mass printed them yet.
Yeah, I just wondered about the county millages. Instead of a source, put the expiration. I think that's more important to people to know when it's going to be coming up.
Okay.
Just my 2 cents.
Is there any other feedback on those? Or any other questions for me specifically?
89 on the budget at a glance, but the letter of support for beads.
Mm-hmm.
Charter didn't ask for a letter of support.
No, and Ascentech hasn't officially asked either. We just anticipate that perhaps they would. At this point, the only for sure ask will be from Cherry Capital.
And part of this information that Katie's asked for regarding broadband distribution is, I had some members of the community that were suggesting with great authority that we'd only covered 20% of the community on broadband.
Yeah.
And we knew it was much larger than that. So that's why we're asking for greater detail. But as she's already pointed out, Cherry Capital's been more than forthcoming with it. And it's hard to get the information from others.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Then I will just finalize saying that I've asked Katie going forward to give us a little more detail. She's not taking all the credit that her office deserves in terms of the activity there. And no, I'm not trying to pull a whatever that acronym is at the federal level, but I think it's helpful if we know more about what's happening for your benefit, not for ours. Okay.
Artist said that I don't take enough credit.
Well, you know, I'm big on celebrating.
I know, but I'm big on it takes a team.
Well, that's okay. You should get a team. Any other comments for Katie?
The people in this building do amazing work.
All right, we are, you've got correspondence in your binder, public comment. Would anybody like to make a public comment? You're doing fine, Eric. Don't worry about it. Believe it or not, I
Just raise your hand.
benefit from your comments at times.
So not to beat a dead horse more than I already have, but your reenactment today was completely unnecessary if you would have had competent legal advice in the first place. And if I were you, I'd be really irritated about that. I know these are MMRMA attorneys that are supposedly working for you, but they didn't work out very well this time or these other 10 times where they were discussing settlement with you or other legal issues in closed session where I prevailed on 10 occasions, probably more, to get closed session minutes ordered released to me. You go to the reenacted motion, picking another dead horse. Katie recommended that you make a motion to actually put the amount in. You release it for a statement afterwards, but Crystal Lake Township, what they did has no bearing or relevance to whether or not you state the terms in your actual motion of how much you settled for, which was $20,000. Crystal Lake Township, $20,000. It's your decision that you have to make on the record. And the decision was to settle for $20,000. When you go to the McCall litigation, if you look at the docket statement, again, a full year, over a year, it was filed in January of 2024. You never met with those attorneys. That's one more reason I'd be really irritated with these MMRMA attorneys that are getting shoved down your throat again for this new McCord lawsuit. I'd ask, I submitted a couple FOIA requests pertaining to the McCord litigation and the McCall litigation. I'd ask that you waive all fees related to that because it's to your benefit to look at all that information that I'm requesting in both of those FOIA requests as well. And I'd ask you consider to waive any potential attorney-client privilege information in that request so that full transparency. I'm really glad that you had this conversation today. You've had a couple conversations about transparency and the OMA FOIA thing you're going to do in April. I think that's a great start to get you more up to speed on that. But going back to the McCall litigation, there's actual decisions that were made throughout that litigation, whether Katie was involved, your administrator or not, I don't know. But when it comes to the final decision that was made where she attended the facilitated mediation on February 5th, I just sent you an email a little bit ago. You might not have read it, but it gives you this again, and it gives you the local court facilitated mediation rules pertaining to that. Can I have another minute?
Yep.
So attached also to that is the links to these documents in the email I sent you, which has the program description for facilitated mediation, where it says a party that is a unit of government need not have present at the session the persons who would be required to approve the settlement before it becomes final, but must send to the session an executive officer in addition to counsel knowledgeable about the facts of the case and the governmental unit's position. Okay? How would Katie have any idea what your position was if you've never met to discuss that litigation ever? And that's a decision. Okay, she went to mediation. So this whole issue of whether you're delegating your authority with this new motion for her to be your representative and in future, the McCord litigation moving forward, she's gonna be making decisions. Are those decisions that she's making going to be making her a public body that needs to actually make those in open session, even if it's an individual? I think you need to consider that. The last thing I'll note is when you made this recommendation to reaffirm her as being responsible for in mediation, court, and settlement proceedings, when did you do that ever in the history of the world before? You haven't. You appointed her as your representative to MMRMA 2021. That's the only evidence I found that even relates to this topic. Never. So you're not reaffirming anything when this is a new action to appoint her to be your representative in legal matters moving forward. And I think you should maybe address that at your future meetings. Thank you.
All right, thanks for your feedback. There is no other public. I'd move for adjournment.
So moved.
Second. Anybody want to oppose it?